G'day and welcome to the Hunting Connection podcast. My name is Zach Williams and I am your host. Here we'll connect you with hunters, fishers and outdoor enthusiasts from around the globe. This podcast will share hunting and fishing stories, including past experiences, and tackle the tough hunting stereotypes our community faces. We hope to be a positive influence to those outside the community while also having a laugh along the way. Hope you enjoy the podcast. Well, g'day and welcome to another episode of the Hunting Connection podcast. Today we have a repeat guest on, Dan from Eureka Tactical. How you going, mate?
I'm good. I'm really excited. A lot more prepared for this one than last time, and this is going to be so fun.
That's all right. Last time was a bit more of a casual one. This one is going to be full of information from yourself, a biologist, our own resident biologist for the show, so...
Yep. Yeah, this is much more in my wheelhouse, and now that I'm qualified and all that, I feel a lot more, confident and comfortable speaking in biology.
No, that's awesome. We definitely need a biologist's view on the hunting side of stuff, that's for sure.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's cool to, have the hunting experience, have the shooting experience, and then also now have a degree in biology, in science. So, I can use all three to make my claims to, back up evidence as to why hunting's good.
Yeah, exactly. From those people that don't know Dan, he gets a mention in nearly every podcast when we're talking about deer control and feral animal control. I always have a bit of a laugh, just because he's got that biologist background, and just have a good laugh, a bit of
completely misrepresent my views all the time, but that's okay.
No, we're going to be clearing that all up, but still, I'm going to still have a laugh at Dan in future episodes to go. So
that's okay. I talk about you behind your back all the time as well, so it's all good.
That's all good. So again, this one's going to be a bit different to a usual podcast. We're going to try and focus on the educational side of stuff, from everything, environmental factors and populations and all sorts of stuff.
Everything about deer in Australia and the damage they do, and control, management, all that.
So this episode was planned out. Dan did an awesome job working out on talking points and how we'll go about it, to be as professional as we can, but it actually came about before the National Deer Plan came out, so it's just we'll go on our topics first. We might cover the National Deer Plan at the end, and what Daniel's been working on that side of things.
Yeah, definitely. Both the notes for this and the plan took a lot of research, and I'm really excited to talk about both because I love research and I like deer. I really like the environment. So being able to talk about all three is pretty cool.
And most hunters would love the environment as well, and love deer and the tasty side effects of shooting deer, venison. So like I said, those of you that don't know Dan is a newly graduated biologist. He runs a company called Eureka Tactical, and he's also vice president for Firearm Owners United, which is our first and only sponsor.
Yeah, do quite a lot when you say it like that.
Yes, you do. Lucky you're out of uni now, so you can focus on all the good stuff on supporting shooters and hunters around Australia.
Yeah, start making money again.
Hopefully that all comes with it. Why helping us hunters out? So give yourself a good introduction and what your past experiences are, where your background of expertise are, and
right. So I've been hunting, I don't know, a long time now, well and truly over 10 years now. And in Queensland, so it's mostly been pigs and rabbits and like foxes and all that, because that's what we have in Queensland. Really, there's a lot of deer, but that's more behind properties that you need to pay to get on and all that, rather than the properties I have, which are all free. And right out of school, I got a job at a gun shop when I was still 17, which was pretty cool. And worked there for a long time and just met a lot of hunters and a lot of shooters. Got to hear their story. That was super cool. Just like talking to lots of people and getting insights from people all around Australia about, why they want that gun, what sort of hunting they do, and all that. When I left that job, I got my firearm instructor license and taught the Queensland firearms safety course for a while, like 5 years, I think, maybe 6, whilst working security as well. And again, that job, I trained like 30 people a week for 5 years on how to use firearms safely, and that was really cool because, again, I got to hear people's stories, talk to people about why they want to get into shooting. Maybe they've already been hunting and shooting and stuff. They're just now getting their license, or maybe they're now getting their Queensland license. And I mean, teaching people how to shoot is fantastic. Can't really beat that. But one thing I noticed talking to all these people, and then listening to different hunting podcasts, maybe hunters on podcasts, like Australian hunters, is things didn't always really add up. I'd hear people talk about how maybe deer, maybe goats, even like in New Zealand, tahr, etc., don't do damage to the Australian environment, which now I'm not really hearing that too much, not too often. Most people say that they do at least some damage, but years ago, people would say like, oh, they don't do any damage, they shouldn't try to cull them, they shouldn't try and do anything. And I'm like, man, that doesn't add up, that like these other people are saying they do damage, and that's why we can actually go hunting in Australia, is because these invasives do damage to the environment, and the Australian government has been like, look, hunting is a genuine reason, and the things that you hunt are the invasives, are the introduced animals, because they do damage. And it doesn't add up. So I was like, look, we've got a pretty decent security job. We've got a pretty good gig training people and teaching people how to shoot. Let's enroll into university, because they were both very flexible, and just really find out what the truth is, find out more information about what's going on. So I enrolled into university to do a Bachelor of Science, majoring in biology, and minoring in wildlife ecology and environmental science. And I graduated last year.
And how long's that course?
It's 3 years. It took me 3.5 years because there was a specific set of subjects I wanted to do, and they're not available all year round. Some subjects are only semester 1, some are only semester 2. So my last year was spread out over 1.5 years, just so I could get the exact subjects I wanted, which included, aside from normal biology like microbiology, cells and bacteria, included ecology, and specifically invasion ecology. So I did a whole subject about invasive species, invasive organisms, how they work, what makes something invasive, like how do we classify it, and everything about that was to do with Australia as well. Not just mammals, but maybe some insects, maybe pathogens, just everything to do with invasion ecology. And so, that was really cool.
Quickly, with the whole invasion ecology side of stuff and what makes stuff feral and introduced and stuff like that, what's your definition of feral versus introduced versus like game species?
Yeah, so that's a really cool question, and something I've actually answered recently with another content creator who did a thing on foxes. So feral isn't really like a scientific term. It's more like It's more like slang. It's nomenclature. It's just an invasive animal that's doing a lot of harm. But what we really need to focus on is what invasive means more than feral and introduced. An invasive species is an organism that's been transported away from its natural habitat where it evolved into a brand new habitat through anthropogenic means. So by human-made means. So like a ship, a plane, someone just putting it in the back of their ute and transporting it somewhere. And that's really important because when it's outside of its area where it evolved, it can either die really quickly because maybe the predators in that new area are, way better than the predators in its natural area, or it can do a lot of damage because it's the super predator, or maybe there's no predators where it evolved with predators. And that's what an invasive species is it proliferates, it reproduces, covers an area, and means the ecosystem is out of whack, is out of balance.
So
and
with all of that, what's like the earliest of introduced species from around the world that you would know? Like, the old ships would go around throwing pigs and goats onto small islands and stuff, so that if they were ever shipwrecked on islands,
so
they'd be there.
That's really interesting. I've not thought about that before, but it would probably have to be like a daddy longlegs or something. I know you're probably hoping for something like in the macrofauna or a megafauna, but really it would have to be maybe like daddy longlegs because they're everywhere. They're not meant to be everywhere, but they're everywhere. Mice were a huge one in all the ships.
My point where I was going with that was more the dingo side of stuff. So dingoes were introduced.
Okay, so dingoes, yeah, that's a good example. So they came across approximately 5,000 years ago, right? From the islands above us, so Indonesia region,
Papua New Guinea and all of those.
Yeah, Papua New Guinea and all that, because a while ago the water levels were a lot lower due to there's a lot more ice right around Antarctica and around the Arctic as well, and just how geology works. Sea levels rise, sea levels dip. There was a time where it was dipped, or potentially through trading. There's a bit of conjecture around how dingoes actually got here. Some people say it's due to a natural land bridge. Some people say it's due to trading. It's really hard to say. But around 5,000 years ago, dingoes entered North Queensland and bred and outcompeted the thylacine and pushed the thylacine to mainland extinction. So it's hard to say if that's an invasive species due to anthropogenic means because we can't really say exactly how they got here.
But if they were brought over here,
then yeah, they're definitely an invasive species.
So
the problem is that they almost perfectly fills the niche of the thylacine, almost perfectly, which is really sad for the thylacine because that was such a cool animal. And then a few hundred years ago we wiped it out, or 100 years ago we wiped it out.
According to some,
it might still be out there, and that's a whole nother thing.
If anyone's listened to Rogan's latest podcast with I've just had a mind blank. What's his name?
Forrest Galante.
Yeah, Forrest Galante.
Yeah. So yeah, the dingo thing is really interesting, and it's hard to say. If you want to do something about dingoes, we can go about dingoes because there's so much interesting research about them and about their role in the ecosystem and whether they are good or bad.
Yeah,
But
the main thing that I was going for there was like if they were introduced via like trading memes brought over from the islands, or even
yeah,
if they made their way here naturally 5 years ago, technically there's still an
I know
invasive
where you're going with this.
species.
And so you're
How
going to go on to say, it's like, that means if they are considered native, that means there's a pathway for invasive species to be considered native.
somewhat so, yeah. Like how long do you give a species being in a place to make it native? So you look at pigs in, say, Hawaii. They've been there since the Spanish sailors came through and tossed pigs out onto the island, and goats, they're a huge part of the Hawaiian culture. They're almost a
Yeah,
native animal to the French Polynesians that landed in Hawaii and called it home.
yeah. So that's a great point and a really good topic we can talk about. Ecologists would not consider the pigs dropped off by Polynesians and then further sailors to be native, and the reason is because they are still destroying the environment. The local fauna and flora has not evolved quickly enough to really counter the pig's destruction. And there are islands, it's like small island chains and stuff, which have been completely devastated by pigs, like that are just bare, which were not previously bare because of pigs being dropped off there. So it's like, how long do you consider something native? Well, sometimes you wouldn't. There's a rat that's been in Australia for like 100,000 years, and that still, some people say, is not native. And that may have gotten here. Oh, that most likely did get here by normal means, by a break in one of the biogeographical barriers, and they were able to break across that and expand naturally. And some people say that's not native. That's been here 100,000 years or more. So, man, it's hard to say. It's hard to say. The
Then
jacaranda, Queenslanders love jacarandas, right? It's a tree that flowers these really beautiful purple flowers over the summer. So that is originally from South America.
there's plenty here in South Australia as well. The
Right.
streets of the suburbia are lined with them.
Yeah, yeah, and all three Queenslanders like that as well. So they are an introduced species, and they also almost one for one fill the niche of a local tree called the flame tree. So the Queensland flame tree, the Illawarra flame tree, which has these really nice red flowers. And I mean, they're mostly protected. Like if you chop down a jacaranda, people are going to be upset. But they're introduced, and they outcompete some native trees. So it's really hard to say for sure.
So what would you say to the people that, want to call deer the new natives in Australia? What would be your message to them?
I would say, what do you know about deer? I'll ask them, what do you actually know that's not, something that backs up your point of view? Because a lot of hunters and a lot of shooters like to say that there's left-wing propaganda all around and stuff, but it's like, just in general. But I mean, if you're only looking at things that back up your point of view, that's propaganda as well, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So I would say, like, what do you actually know? Have you ever read the research? Not like ABC's view on the research or someone else's interpretation, but the actual studies, the raw data, and considered the actual impact onto the environment that they have. And when I say the environment, I mean the environment, not like, someone's fences and stuff. Because I hear a lot of people be like, they have whataboutisms, right? Like, oh, what about this other thing? They damage fences. And it's like, bro, fences aren't the environment. Like, fence posts, are usually wood, and, wood comes from trees, yes, but it's like, and so I say like listen to this podcast and just think about the actual damage they do and understand. I'm not advocating for there to be helicopters going around everywhere and culling deer. I just want to put the research out there and show that they do damage to the environment, and it's a lot more than what I think hunters accept.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's damaging.
Side note to this conversation about it, listening to Forrest and Rogan talk about introducing mammoths and stuff back into like the top of Russia, Siberia and stuff like that. And Forrest is talking about, replacing animals that haven't been there for a long time and their impact on the environment, stuff like that, bringing back the woolly mammoth to Siberia and stuff like that. With megafauna here in Australia that went extinct thousands of years ago, is there chances that some of these introduced species are just taking up roles that some of this extinct megafauna?
Yeah, so that's something that gets brought up often by hunters, basically as justification. And that's been looked into, and not really, because what was the megafauna here, and how long ago did it go extinct? Why did it go extinct? And what was their makeup? What was their biology? So we've got the short-faced kangaroo, which is my favorite extinct megafauna. So this is a kangaroo. I don't know how to pronounce its Latin name because it's like wild.
Yeah, no, we'll just get rid of Latin names right now.
Yep. So it was it can go up to 3 meters tall, right? And up to 240 kilograms. Bro, that's a unit. And it didn't have the snout that the kangaroos kind of have. It was short-faced kangaroo, so kind of looking like us, So can you imagine like being the first Australians to come over here by boat? They rock up on the beach, and there's this 3 meter tall kangaroo that's 200 kilos, just like there. That's insane. And then the other thing about it is it could actually walk bipedally, so it didn't have to. Maybe it didn't have to hop, and it didn't have to walk pentadactyly like they do now. They think that it could have moved both of its legs individually. So there was a 3 meter tall, 200 kilo person looking thing that walked. Like this it is like this walking up onto the beach as you arrive. That's insane. But I just really like extinct megafauna. So
speaking of extinct megafauna and stuff like that,
so there was this one called the Didopterodon. I don't know how to pronounce it. It was this giant wombat, essentially. And that's the thing that some people use as an example of what maybe deer could be replacing. And its foraging habits aren't really the same. And its impact to the soil, which we will learn about during this podcast, was completely different. So just with hooves versus like these big wide pads, different impacts, way different impacts, which, as you've probably already noticed, I could sidetrack and go on about for a very long time.
No, it's good. Sidetracks are good. Have you ever looked into like the limestone coast area of South Australia and all the caves down this way?
There's a very interesting cave I do want to see, which potentially houses a subspecies of masked owl in the Nullarbor. That's not where you're going with that.
No.
But it's one of the only. There's this owl called the masked owl, and its call is demonic. And there used to be reports of one living in this cave, and so hearing demonic calls in a cave would just be outstanding. But aside from that, no, and I don't know where you're going with that.
That's another point for everyone listening. Dan is obsessed with owls. Like,
they're very cool.
yeah, whether he watched too much Winnie the Pooh as a kid and related mostly to Owl, just being the grumpy one of the group, but
I only grumpy when I talk to you. It's really weird.
and other people that want deer to be classed as native. But where I was going with it was Narracourt Caves here in South Australia. So
Yeah,
we
write that
have.
down.
I'm actually surprised you don't know about it. So it's a massive limestone cave system that runs all through the southeast of South Australia, and it is filled with bones from pretty much every megafauna animal that lived through the area. And you can go cave diving in them because they've got these pristine limestone caverns that are underwater, and people go diving. You can do cave exploring in them, and they've got all bones on display of all the replica, like the short-faced kangaroo and the giant wombat that you were talking about. So when you were talking about them, that's where my mind went straight away. Was the
that's really cool.
caves.
Yeah, look, that area of study, which one of my really good friends is getting into, and I just can't remember the name at the moment. Starts with a P. Doesn't matter. Is not really my main interest, but it's very cool when it comes up. Like when it comes up, I get gone to deep dives, but it's not my main interest. I like things that are alive now.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome though. So if anyone hasn't gone through that part of southeast of South Australia, head over to Narracourt Caves, Mount Gambier. There's a bunch of different caves you can go check out. There's one on I think it's the Swan River or whatever it is, right on the edge of the South Australian Victoria border. That's another awesome cave system to go check out. But yeah, it's so cool seeing all the different bones and stuff they've collected, and the remade models of what they believe the animals look like, and they've got huge statues out the front of the Narracourt Caves of
That's cool.
These extinct megafauna that Dan's talking about. So I highly recommend.
Whilst we're talking about megafauna, just because it's really cool and you like duck hunting, you know about the old megafauna duck?
No, I do not.
Okay, bro. So this duck, this is what they called it. This is what because it was insane when they found the fossils. It's called the Demon Duck of Doom. Like that's what they sort of decide to name it. So that name is Bicornis, right? And it was this like 2 or 3 meter tall duck.
That's nuts.
It was more like an emu, but just how skeletons work and stuff. It looks like a duck, but many meters tall and very heavy. It's I don't know. It's insane. It's really cool. Balacornis, or others known as the Demon Duck of Doom. What an animal!
That's awesome.
Anyway, like I said, if we don't keep to these notes, I'm going to get sidetracked so easily.
It's all good. That's what I like about podcast is the rabbit holes. Lucky we got your notes to keep us on track. So you've gone to uni after working in the firearms industry and working with people. You've enrolled into uni because you started hearing mixed reports of what introduced animals are doing to the landscape. One from the hunter's side, 2 from the environmental side of stuff, and you wanted to get to the bottom of it. What's some key takeaway points from uni that you've come away with over the years?
Oh man! All right, we've got many key takeaways. So something that I was surprised about is I went to a university that was in the middle of the city, and a lot of classmates were, inner city people. And not once over those 3.5 years did I have someone object to me hunting and shooting. I actually had overwhelming interest in the things that I do, shooting and hunting, look, it was not good on my part to go into university, expecting that. But I was, pretty political in my early 20s and stuff. And, just at that time, like, say, like 2016 to 2019 was a highly political time. And, in the student spaces and stuff, people would talk about those inner city greeny lefties and stuff. They're everywhere in the unis and it's all socialist and all that. And my time in uni, I just met so many people so interested in shooting, so interested in hunting. Like even like professors and my lecturers and stuff, almost all of them were either neutral about hunting or pro hunting. When I say neutral, it was just like, well, it's cool and whatever, but it's like not my interest or whatever. But like my invasion ecology professor, he was like, hunting's cool because it makes my job easier if you guys are out there killing invasive species yourself and stuff like that. So yeah, that was really a surprise to me.
So, do you feel, and I know me and you have had this discussion before, do you feel that that's just because you're in Queensland and Queensland's kind of that bogan country?
See, I don't know because I haven't gone to universities in other states, but look, when you and I compare our experiences with talking to like random people about hunting and shooting, and when I listen to your podcast, talking, other people talking about their experiences, it's mostly negative. Whereas my experience is, in the inner city, in the suburbs, everyone's either indifferent or pro. So it might be a Queensland thing. I don't know. Maybe it's just a you thing.
Yeah, it's funny because I did conservation land management for a brief bit at TAFE here in South Australia, and I'm like, oh, this will be cool. I always wanted to become a park ranger, when I was growing up.
Right.
So I got into conservation land management and study. Just not for me. I can't keep track in a classroom. Oh, there's a butterfly out the window. Or like Homer Simpson chasing squirrels out of a tree. That's me. But talking to the lecturer that I had, and just other people in the class, some of them were like interested in hunting but wouldn't do it. But majority of the people seemed to be getting into it were that greeny side of people. And then when I was doing charity fundraising for a conservation group in Australia, standing out of the front of the unis, asking these poor uni students to sign up for a coffee a week to donate money to Australian Conservation Foundation, and getting to chat to all these uni students that are coming straight out of the university. They're doing all these arts degrees and nursing degrees and stuff like that, and chatting to them, and I'm here trying to get them to sign up to a conservation charity.
Yeah.
When they're like, oh, what'd you get up to on the weekend? Oh, I went and shot deer, or I was out hunting goats. And they're like, they seemed horrified most of the time, but that could just be
I don't know. Hey, like I said, I mean, from just my classmates to people working at the university, I really didn't come across anything negative to shooting or hunting. Like when I say shooting, I mean firearm ownership as well. I had people interested, like asking me how to get a license, to take them out shooting, to take hunting and how to get into that. And it was such a surprise. So I'm not sure why everyone else has this experience, but yeah, my experience was people are interested.
Could be just
really
because
there's
sorry.
Go on.
Could that be because there's just like 6 people at a Queensland university?
Maybe, but and it might be just that thing that Queensland is a bit. Brisbane only really became like a city in the 90s after the World Trade Fair or something like that. Brisbane was considered a rural town until like 1988. And you can tell that. I used to work in an office Well, I was an office worker, I was a security worker, and almost everyone I talked to would at least have like one cousin or one uncle or whoever who would go shoot rabbits or something like that. So yeah, pretty much everyone in Brisbane just is connected to shooting in some way. So it might be just a Queensland thing. I'm not sure.
Well, it's something that you brought up in the past is that like I've said, like I've spoken to people and they didn't even realize that deer were in Australia, and then I've explained to them, there's 6 different species, and there was a bunch more introduced into Australia, and you're like, everyone in Queensland seems to know that
It's
deer,
on our coat of arms.
yeah, exactly. But
red deer were a gift to like the mayor of Brisbane in the 1800s from Queen someone or other, or on behalf of the Queen. It's on our coat of arms, so everyone in Queensland knows that there's deer here. But we're just built different.
that you are. so
you go on.
No, go on. You're.
I was going to say, so other things about uni and about being sidetracked by a butterfly. Last year I was on a field trip that went for a while on a property, right? And the property was it's a like 2,000 acre working cattle farm that runs crops as well. It's owned and run by the person who works at university who's running the subject called Soils. So we were working on doing soil sampling, and I'm just like with a group of 5 people walking through Lantana and walking through the bush, and this place backs onto a national park, and I heard some rustling. I heard some little rustling, and I heard I can't recreate the sound, but I heard a red deer. My microphone's gone
roaring or just barking, or
like roaring. And I was like, "Oh, hello, what's going on here?" And these other people were like, "What was that?" And I'm like, "That is very interesting." And so we'll continue working, and we're walking up through this bush, and there's a big red deer, just chilling there. And I was like, "Why? Why am I on a field trip right now, digging up soil? Like, why don't I have a rifle with me right now?" And the whole time I'm like, "Oh man, such a wasted opportunity."
100%. The amount of
deer,
deer,
it's so cool.
The amount of deer I've seen while working, like just doing a delivery, and there's deer sitting out in someone's paddock as you're driving up the driveway, and it's like, God damn it,
right? Yeah, it was. I don't know. It was very cool, and it was cool being with these, because these people, actually, one of them was actually from a farm that one of my family members owned after they moved out. It's a weird small world coincidence thing, but anyway, most of them hadn't seen deer before. They know they were there, but just hadn't seen it, hadn't heard it, and it was a good experience to be with them for that, just in that area and see that for their first time. And as we're working, I was just sort of explained, they get hunted because they do damage, etc. And I don't know, it's a good experience.
So, what are some things that you've learnt by doing your bits of work that you've done, and then university as well?
I've learned so much. You got to be more specific. I've learned how to sell guns. I've learned how to dig up soil. Do you have something in mind?
I was more about going off your notes about field work and correcting assumptions and stuff that previous guests have made.
An assumption that I hear all the time from you and your guests, the hunting community, and what I had before I went to university and learned more about biology as a career, is that these guys don't go into the field that often. They might go into the field a little bit, make some notes, and then make decisions based off of lack of field work, essentially. Something you see in hunting groups all the time. Usually when there's like a news article posted, the news article vastly misinterpreting the research and the science, they'll be like, oh, those people are just in their offices. They don't know what the field is like. They don't know what the bush is like, etc., etc. And man, was I wrong. And man, is everyone else wrong. So I have some friends who've been doing this for a while, right? Maybe they graduated before me. Maybe I just met them through other means. And man, these guys do some serious field work. A friend, I hope I can call them a friend, but someone I train with, graduated a few years ago, a different university, with an environmental science degree. And her job is to go out into the field, private property and public-owned lands, and test waterways and stuff. But her overall team is doing a lot of things. Maybe they're doing other research whilst they're all out there. And she explained to me her job is 2 weeks in the field straight, and then 2 weeks back in the office analyzing the data. So that's not 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. That's always working, but just 2 weeks in the field collecting data, 2 weeks back in the office when you've got internet, power, etc. Doing all the analysis and stuff. And they could be living in tents or they could be living in dongas. So that's if she doesn't take time off, that's 26 weeks in the field per year. That's quite a lot. Another friend of mine's an ecologist, and he does do fly in, fly out work. From Brisbane, he flies up to far north Queensland to do ecology work. And yeah, again, that's 2 weeks in the field in far north Queensland. Bro, he's been doing that over the summer. That's nuts.
Good fun.
And then 2 weeks back in Brisbane on his laptop and analyzing stuff. That's a lot of field time. That is an insane amount of field time. A friend of mine in the US, which we don't have as hardcore as what he did, but we have very similar things. He was studying kangaroo rats in the Arizona desert for 2 months straight. So what he said to me is he lived in a tent for 2 months. He showered twice. He slept in a bed twice in that 2 month period, in that 2 month study period. That's a lot of field time, bro. An assumption that I had and a lot of people have is that, the guys doing the research aren't in the field and they don't know what things are actually like. But the guys doing the research and publishing studies, they are in the field.
But do you also
news articles misinterpret their research and use it for, their own purposes or whatever? But the people actually doing the studies, they're in the field.
Do you feel that they go in looking at stuff different as well compared to what hunters? So hunters who spend a lot of time in the bush, they're seeing the damage that some of these invasive animals are doing, but we're looking for sign, trails, markings, all of that stuff to hunt them. Do you feel that the people who are spending time in the field studying for biology reasons, they're looking at stuff completely different?
That's something really interesting. So when you try to find research on invasive species in Australia, one name comes up so often, especially to do with deer, especially to do with hunting. His name's David, because I don't know him or anything like that, so I'm not going to say his full name, but it's David, and it comes up very often. When you publish a study, you've got to announce any conflicts of interest or anything like that. Every single time he does a study on invasive species or effectiveness on shooting invasive species, which we'll go into a bit later, his conflict of interest is that he has a New South Wales R license and is an SSAA member and an active hunter. So one of the main names, and he's got like 150 publications on invasive species in Australia. So one of the main people studying invasive species, or invasive mammals at least, is a hunter, which is really interesting. But to answer your question, yeah, I mean, you're doing different things, right? You're going out for different purposes. If you're doing anything for a specific purpose, you're trying to do that specific thing, if that makes sense. So if you're looking for deer to hunt them, yeah, you're looking for signs. If you're trying to figure out the damage that deer do, you're looking for the deer. But the experimental design is set up to really narrow down exactly what the deer is doing on a specific species, on soil, on something, to really figure out. It's like, okay, is this actually happening? Is it not happening? What's the effects? And when we talk about plants, when we talk about that, I'll go over what the experimental designs are, and show you sort of they do know what they're talking about. And I think it's really important, if people are going to make commentary in this space, they should probably really try and look up the research and read the research itself, rather than interpretations of the research by specific councils which may have agendas, committees which may have agendas, and see that the research itself is not bad. It's not saying anything bad. It's how certain people are using the research, and we can use the research to justify recreational hunting, as well.
As with your national deer plan,
Yeah,
write up that you just done.
exactly.
So, do you feel that if you'd say majority of these biologists going out and looking into the impact of introduced species are looking at it one way, but if you say you sent them out with a hunter who doesn't have the biology side of study, so that the hunter's picking up on stuff that the biologist isn't picking up on, and the biologist is teaching and showing the hunter that the stuff that he isn't picking up on when he's out, do you think that would have a like a different outcome for the hunting community on how we look at when scientists go out in the field? Like, because a lot of Australian hunters feel like the scientists and biologists and all of that going out into the field are just pushing a government agenda to wipe out all invasive species and get rid of hunting so people that can't own guns and stuff like that. So do you reckon if we had something like a program like that where, the hunters and biologists are working side by side?
Look, I think that's a very interesting thing. And so again, something to understand is the research itself is not political. The research itself is not trying to say, hey, we need to kill deer, therefore we need to try and find a reason why, and then we need to get rid of guns. The research isn't out there. The researchers aren't trying to find a conclusion, right? They don't have a predetermined conclusion. So the people, like I said, the people doing the actual research themselves might be hunters, might be people who just care about the environment. But research by nature doesn't have a political bias, at least not environmental science, in my opinion. Maybe research to do with medical stuff and health, maybe, but that's a whole nother topic. Yeah, and but this sort of science has to be repeatable and held up to scrutiny, right? So if someone comes up with the conclusion and other people go out and do the same methods and don't reach the same conclusion, don't get the same results, that first bit of research is like looked at really heavily and it's like, hey, what's the go with this? So it's not so much the biologists and the researchers that we need to sort of be wary of. It's the who's using this research, why they using it in a certain way. I think it'd be super cool. Like if you went out with some researchers, you might be able to find the deer easier and help them with their research. And if if there's any hunters who are open-minded and don't have pre-made conclusions, I think it'd be a really interesting, like what the conversation that's about to happen about this topic, I think would be really enlightening. Just to say, look, deer in Australia are doing damage. Here's how they're doing damage, and we can show you how they're doing damage. And look, come to your own conclusion as to what should happen. You know, I really love Australia. I really love the Australian environment. All of our animals, and look, I'll say now, like, I do prioritize those over the invasive species, but hunting is so freaking cool, and as humans, we need hunting. So we definitely do need recreational hunting. We do need to be able to have an opportunity to fill our freezers with meat that we've gathered ourselves. So when we're talking about, removing deer, we can use the research to show, look, it should be hunters who are doing this, not a team of helicopters doing it. And there's actually extra reasons why, aside from this personal philosophy, which we'll definitely go into during this, as to why it needs to be recreational hunters who are the main tool of killing deer and removing their numbers, as opposed to helicopters and stuff. So I don't know if that really answers your question. I have a habit of kind of interpreting things my own way and then going off, but
as we all do.
If you like that question and you feel I didn't answer it, then, like, to anyone listening, just DM me, and then I'll go on another sidetrack when I talk to you. So it's not going to help.
Yeah, it's a hard one because, as hunters, we feel as we're always under attack. As I've spoken about many times on this podcast, I have the internal struggle of the conservation side that, I grew up reading all these conservation books and introduced species books and watching Steve Irwin go on about invasive species, and then from me hunting deer and then forming this complete love with deer, and wouldn't be who I am today without them, as many hunters in Australia feel. So, all these talks of the media and government going, we need to eradicate. It doesn't sit well with 98% of the hunters.
And I appreciate that, and I acknowledge that, because hunting's so important. But on that, and I've just noticed we've been talking for an hour and 10 minutes and haven't even started. I'm gonna pose you two questions, not really questions for you to actually answer, but just think about. So one, what do you know about the damage deer do to the Australian environment now? When I say the environment, I mean the environment, not to agriculture, not to infrastructure, but to the environment. And the second one is, do we, as European Australians and anyone else who's listening, have an inherent right to hunt deer in Australia? So I'm not asking, do we have an inherent right to hunt, but do we have an inherent right to hunt deer in Australia? And I think that's going to come down to personal beliefs. I don't think there's a correct answer. I don't think there's a wrong answer. Actually, the internet, there might be wrong answers. But I think that's something really important to think about. I think about that all the time, like all the time. Do we have and I think about it like so many other things as well. Like, do we have an inherent right for like so many things, but specifically to this podcast, to hunt deer in Australia?
Yeah, it's definitely a tough subject, especially with this national deer plan that's come out in the wake of us organising this podcast. We've been discussing whether we should, add more to this. Like you said, we're already an hour into this and we've barely touched on.
Well, we haven't even started.
Yeah.
So with that, I think we should start. So, like I said, this is all written and researched before I read the National Feral Deer Action Plan, and submitted my response. So, I have some thoughts on that plan, and I have thoughts on why recreational hunting wasn't included, and that's really important, and it's going to be reflected in this podcast. But I think we should probably start. And so how this is going to go, I know this is your podcast. I'm just taking over now.
Go on.
So I've written down. Well, first there's some questions by people, and they're going to be answered me directly. I wrote it down, the answers, so I'm not going to get sidetracked when answering those. So we're going to answer some questions, and then there's a list of impacts that I've written down, like impacts on plants, habitat engineering, predator impacts, etc. And we're going to go topic by topic on how deer affect Australian plants, how deer affect the habitat, what they do to the soil by topic. And I'm going to talk about the research, like what the research actually says. Then I'm going to maybe give my thoughts, and throughout that, I guess Zach is going to
make some smart ass comments.
Questions. And just help with that. Now, by the time this gets published, I'm going to have a read along thing on Eureka Tactical's website. So, from the point when we actually start, you can read along the research, because I don't want to be that person who's like, research from this person titled deer impacts on a specific plant says this and this. That's all going to be in the read along. So this is going to be a very generalized interpretation of the overall research on each topic. And then if you want the references, if you want the citations to read yourself, that's going to be on my website.
Yeah, it's definitely something you're going to, as you're listening, you want to keep your emotions out of it.
I like that you said that.
Hey, I'm a very emotional person on this subject, and I'll be the first to admit that, when it comes to hunting, when it comes to deer, when it comes to all of this stuff, I get very emotional. I get very defensive. And I'll be the first to admit that. It's my passion, it's my love, it's my lifestyle. I would have met all these amazing people if it wasn't for it. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if it wasn't for these things.
Right.
So yeah.
Damn, that's a shame. Maybe we should have got rid of deer then.
Well, I still think you're an undercover vegan. Infiltrating the hunting shooting world.
Yeah, I just spent a week straight researching and writing a submission to defend hunting because I'm a vegan.
Yeah, exactly. You've got your ulterior motives, I'm guessing. Nah, all jokes aside. So the questions you put out to people in some of the Facebook groups and Instagram, the Facebook groups that I run, and your Instagram and whoever else shared it. So first we got Dragon T. He wants to know about the plants deer eat, the habitat, the real damage they do based on science, evidence, and not left-wing propaganda. How effective government control has been compared to the public control, and compare the efforts of environmental damage to housing developments, forestry, greeneries, everything.
Yeah. So that first point on plants is going to be the first topic that we cover. So they definitely do damage to plants and the habitat and the environment. I'm really going to cover that. And I really hope I've already spelled out that none of this is going to be left-wing propaganda. Something I want to be really clear on is everything I say is going to be, up until when we talk about the deer plan, it's apolitical, very neutral. And I'm going to try and be as objective as possible when I guess when I wrote this, I was trying to be as objective as possible, just the research. And, to build on your point, look, some of this might contradict some long-held beliefs about the damage they actually do. And I think that's going to be a good opportunity for, to learn and to grow and to understand I'm not putting this out there to eradicate deer or to ban guns or anything. Trust me, I've made, like I said, before I was even 18, I was in the shooting industry. My entire income has been based on guns being legal. I need them to be legal for me to eat. So I definitely don't want them banned. And I've been attacked for like just for saying deer do damage. I've had people tell me that I'm an anti-gunner, and that's definitely not the case. And if you think so, I've done more for gun laws than you have. Now the rest. So he was saying that compare the effects, the environmental damage to like housing developments, forestry, so the greens, apples, phones, and vegan sourced goods and stuff. So I don't really know what like Apple phones and deer have in common, so I can't answer that. But housing and development and industry development and all that is a socio-political issue. There's a lot of economics to do with that, and I'm not really qualified to talk about that. And look, bulldozers do a lot of damage to the environment. Absolutely, they do a lot of damage. But just because they do damage doesn't mean deer don't do damage, right? And that sort of talk, whataboutisms, is a deflection. You see it all the time in like community Facebook groups where someone's like, hey, make sure you keep your cats inside. And people will be like, my cat doesn't do damage. Like, what about the bulldozers and that new development and stuff? It's like, look, yeah, your cat still kills lizards whilst that bulldozer knocks down trees. So I don't want to go into whataboutisms. The ever expanding urban development is something to talk to someone who's into politics and economics, not to me.
So another question, just Andrew H talking about Eureka Tactical.
Yep.
As we'll share.
I sold him. He didn't want a white shirt. I sold him a green shirt. Yep. Sorted.
So if anyone hasn't gone over and checked out Eureka Tactical's website, check it out. I'm currently wearing the hunter gatherer fishing shirt. It's got Dan's outline with a fishing rod on it from a monkey all the way up the evolutionary train.
Monkey to me, it's a short trip.
And then you're rocking the hunt deer, eat venison shirt, which I feel like I helped you out on designing some of them. So then jumping from there, you got Cody Gear on, previous guest. Curious about the history and story of hog deer and how we ended up with the current ballot system, which I went over on my last podcast as we're talking, but this would be 2 episodes ago with Barry Howlett.
So after he put that question out there, you sent me a message like an hour later, just by coincidence, being like, hey, I'm having Barry on about hog deer and stuff. I was like, well, damn, that's good, but damn. So really, you've covered, and I had notes about this really interesting research about their DNA, but you already talked to Barry about that. So just listen to Zach's podcast with Barry, Cody, and yeah.
And when you're listening to this episode, Cody, I'm currently sitting on Snake Island in my stand, or possibly I've even smoked a hog deer by now. When this episode's released,
congratulations to Cody for yesterday for us, but like 4 weeks ago when this comes out.
Yes. Congratulations to the birth of your daughter. Exciting times, but yeah, when this episode releases, I'll be hopefully tagged out of a hog deer, but that's that's only the Tuesday, so I'd only been hunting for a day and a half by then. Moving on, Lacan from Fill the Freezer from a few episodes ago wants to talk about control versus eradication. So him and I had the conversation towards the end of our podcast about how he would like a control version versus eradication, throughout Australia and New Zealand. What's your take on all of that?
Yeah, so him and I have been talking since, and I asked him to expand on what he means, because look, eradication is a form of control, right? Just and he really wanted a tracked hunting system. So, have people go in and have tags, make sure we can look at the populations that way. And also just wanting hunters more included in the control methods. And look, just such a great coincidence. I shouldn't say great, but just such a coincidence that as we were doing all this, the research for this and writing this, the National Feral Deer Action Plan came out, and we started reading about that. So we are going to talk about control, eradication, what the plan means, and I guess our thoughts. And my thoughts are based on very heavy research on what they should be. So we are going to talk about that. But I just want to say, look, eradication is a form of control. So, but we're going to talk about a better system.
Yeah, 100%.
I did a lot of research.
Yes, you have. So the first impacts to talk about, plants. Tell me about how deer impact Australian plants and plant communities.
Yeah. So, all right, we're finally getting into it after an hour and 22 minutes.
That's how long we've been on. We've only been we're about an hour 6 into the podcast now. So
right. So first, I need to go over how these things are studied, because that's really important to understand how these conclusions are made. So there's enclosure and exclosure studies. So what they are large areas, up to thousands of acres, are cordoned off. So where they find where deer are, areas are cordoned off with exclusion fencing. And this could be, for a single study, maybe 4 plots. And they know there are deer in these plots, and they might eradicate all the deer in that plot, right? And so then in the second plot where the deer are, it's the same trees, it's the same ecosystem, same plants, just there's deer and no deer, right? Does that make sense?
Yep.
And that's done for months at a time, months at a time with frequent checks. They might be living out there. They might be going out every week to do analysis, and then they just compare the two. So what did the studies actually show? Very important. So deer will defoliate. That means take all the leaves off. They'll strip bark and break stems, which leads to a large reduction in the plant's biomass at the lower level of the forestry, which is the shrub layer. So you've got multiple layers in a forest. So at the shrub layer, they defoliate, strip bark, and break stems. So this will then impede vertical growth of any new growth. So if there's a new tree sprouting, and it's just been, or the leaves are being taken off, it's not going to get the energy to grow into a big strong tree. If trees can't grow, that changes the ecology of an area.
Just on that, in say my local hunting areas, you're looking at the Adelaide Hills. So we've had a few big fires come through over the past 8 years. So there's lots of new regrowth of vegetation. So the deer are rubbing on lots of saplings and stuff, but majority of these trees are competing to grow through there. So more than half of the trees won't reach their mature stage anyway.
Right. And so then, because now there's this extra thing that's damaging them, there's going to be even less.
Do you feel that though? Because it's they're rubbing certain saplings, and then
rubbing is a different issue.
There's less. They're stripping, rubbing, stripping. It's the same. It's the same thing where they're taking out more of the competitive growth. So these there's less competitive for the trees to grow, and there's more overall growth.
So, but what if it was a species that actually required simultaneous growth? Because neither of us are experts on trees in your specific area, right?
Definitely not.
Did my microphone just?
No,
Doesn't
you're
matter. So, making those comments without really understanding the exact tree ecology and biology, man, it's really hard to say. It's like what if those trees needed each other for simultaneous growth? There might be a commensal relationship between one growing and the other growing, because there's a great book called The Hidden Lives of Trees, where it shows a lot of trees growing simultaneously actually transfer nutrients, right? Especially if they're the same species, through the mycelium between them. But that's a whole nother subject matter. So yeah, because these trees haven't evolved with deer eating them, it's really impacting the vertical growth. And so then further exposure studies show that the presence of deer can reduce overall vegetation cover. They can halt tree regeneration, like we just said, sapling growth, and overall plant biomass, right? So the total mass of plant material in a certain area. And then this reduces biodiversity of plant species. So a really interesting study, it was a very small study of rooster deer, indicate they reduce understory in the forestry. So understory is above the shrub layer, but well below the canopy layer, depending on the actual forest itself. So just the presence of them with how they eat can reduce the understory of a forest system.
So why is this stuff so hard to spot?
Yeah, so a saying that I have, I didn't make up, I don't know where I got this, which gets misinterpreted all the time, especially by you, is you don't know what you don't know. So I'm not saying that you don't know something. I'm saying like there's things out there that you don't even know you don't know, right? So like I said, if you aren't a tree expert, if you aren't an expert in that local ecology, then it might just seem like those trees aren't meant to have leaves at that layer. But once you remove the deer and you compare trees to an area where there's no deer compared to where they are of the same species, then it's like, oh look, hang on, there actually is meant to be leaves at this layer. There's meant to be foliage, but because there's deer here, there isn't. But like if your experience is just in areas where there are deer, and again, like you're not an expert, then it just looks normal to you, and so that's why it's really, really hard to spot, because I guess if you're not an expert, you're not an expert.
Do their eating habits have other effects on?
Yeah, so something that's really interesting is sambar deer and hog deer, but hog deer have a smaller range. But sambar deer especially have been really studied, heavily studied. They have a really broad diet, right? So they can eat something, they can eat a seed of something, and then because they can travel really far, they poop out that seed, and then it plants. Now, that is how normal. That's a normal way how trees reproduce. Our native species do that as well. But two things: one, Australia has a lot of invasive plants, so they could be translocating invasive plants, and a sambar deer travels a lot further than, say, like a dunnart or a bandicoot, an antechinus. You know what I mean?
But I understand what you're saying, but then you put in native bird species that eat seeds of these introduced plants, and
that's also a massive problem.
They're flying them out. Like you look at down here, I'm not sure how much you know about it. I've always referred to it as mistletoe, but it's like an invasive parasite plant that grows on the gum trees down here and just takes over and sucks
Do you know this one? Yes.
the nutrients out of the local gums. But that's transported by birds in their droppings.
And,
they'll eat.
And so the I guess the point is like I said before, it's an extra factor that's been included because of anthropogenic means. So the invasive plants also terrible, and they spread by a lot of means, and one of them is by an introduced species. So it's just an extra bit of thing that they can do. But also native species can become invasive, right? So some plants are just native to like 100-meter radius. Yeah, that's a bit of exaggeration, but there's local area plants, and a deer might eat that plant, travel very far, and then plant it somewhere else. And it's like, well, it's still a native species. It's like, well, it's not, because native doesn't just mean native to the island of Australia. It also just means to a very local biogeographic region.
And Barry and I covered this a little bit last week when we were talking about the hog deer introductions, and they were introducing kangaroos and wombats into areas after they had introduced wombats into hog deer into areas where they'd never had wombats or kangaroos as far as we know. And then you were talking about there was also talks about koalas, and then you and I were speaking. What were you talking about in Western Australia?
So Western Australia, kookaburras aren't native to like the Perth region of Western Australia. And so sometime in the 1900s, people brought kookaburras over to that area, and they are destroying the ecosystem because they're outcompeting the native kingfishers. Kookaburras are carnivores. They will mess things up. They're killing birds, outcompeting birds, and the reptiles, because the reptiles there haven't evolved to defend against kookaburras, right? So just within Australia, a very iconic Australian species, the kookaburra, is invasive to another part, and that's just how effective it can be. So something from like India coming here compounds the effects.
Yeah, exactly. So aside from eating them, what else are they doing to plants that is negative?
Yeah. So something that you're already interested in, and in fact a lot of hunters acknowledge, but not to the extent, is antler rubbing. So as a deer grows its antlers, I think most people who are listening are hunters, so they know deer grow antlers. And then due to various reasons, due to the growth, they rub them on trees.
I'm so glad you said antlers and not horns. I don't have to jump through the camera and slap you.
Yeah, it's a pretty big distinction. There's a big difference between antlers and horns. So this, when you rub a tree around its entire circumference, is known as girdling or ring barking, right? And this is a very, it's not just deer who do this. Like, this is a way of killing a tree. You put a chain around the tree, you go back and forth, and it can kill it. How it kills it is it digs through the bark layer into the cambium, and then I forgot what the veins are called, phloem and xylem, I think. I can't remember exactly. It can cut off essentially the veins of a tree, so it can't transport nutrients and water up and down the stems, the trunk, etc. So it kills the tree. Now, this has been studied, and they kill a lot of saplings this way, and they are very much damaging larger trees of certain species, which I don't know how to pronounce. SZYGUIM or something like that. I don't know how to pronounce it, but there was a study that went into the effects of how some large trees aren't affected, like you might have a species of tree, and when it's an adult and it gets antler rubs, it's not really affected, but as a sapling, it's affected. Other ones, it's the reverse. Saplings don't really get affected by antler rubbing, but the large ones do, like the adult trees do. And it's down to a species by species level. And I know it's really interesting. But you're talking to you and other hunters minimize the effects.
Yeah, 100%. But it's also the species we chase. I don't see fallow deer rubbing on mature trees too much. There might be a few tine marks here and there, but nothing to the extent of some of the photos that you see up in Queensland with chital and rooster deer. So, you're seeing the effects of your local area and not like the Australia-wide effects of different species that you aren't hunting as well. So that's something else to take into consideration when talking about it as well. We've got, 4 species from the Indian continent and then 2 from the European continent. So
Yep. It's definitely something to remember. And I've done a lot of research into this, but the deer plan mentioned that they're damaging scar trees, which does make sense, because if they're killing a tree and it happens to be a scar tree, then it's damaging that. But it's a noted effect, and that's culturally important. And so that's something to consider as well.
That's a weird one for me. It's okay for a human to scar the tree, but if a deer comes along and then scars the same tree, it's an issue. That's just my personal take on it. You and I have chatted about this, and I've had a bit of a laugh about it. It's okay for one mammal to come through and scar it and cut a shield out of it or cut a canoe out of it, and possibly killing the tree in the meantime, where another mammal comes along and rubs it. Or you've got cockatoos that scar trees and stuff like that, and it's somewhat okay, and you can't control the native species that do the damage. But as soon as it's an introduced species like deer, it's a big no-no.
Well, so on that, ecosystems evolve over millions of years. So cockatoos do damage trees. They don't ring bark, and they don't usually break down to the cambium layer. But when talking about a native species killing a tree, that native species have been killing that tree for hundreds of thousands or millions of years, and so that tree has developed a reproductive system that counters that by producing more or whatever. So but it's
also not for the population that these native species are in. Most of these native species are in greater populations than European settlement. So these native tree species, they're in less populations, so they're struggling to survive anyway as well. So yes, the deer do the damage, but because we've got a shit way of controlling native species because they're quote-unquote native, even though they're in greater numbers than pre-European settlement.
Not all.
Not all. I did not say all, but, kangaroos 100% are, depending where you are in Australia.
Yeah.
Cockatoos are. It's just more water, more feed than there ever has been, and more consistent water and feed across the landscape.
Yeah, so the antler, the rubbing thing is, you really got to consider the local ecosystem.
Yeah, 100%. So, what's their diet compared to native animals? Is there any competition?
Yeah, so as herbivores, there's a lot of dietary overlap, and so this has an actual name in biology called interspecific competition. And now it's been proven that there is a risk for this, but in times of high feed, that it hasn't really been shown that they eat so much that kangaroos don't have access. However, this is really important research when it comes to times of drought, that the presence of deer might be really impacting kangaroo population numbers or wombat population numbers because of the interspecific competition with their diet. So at the moment, it's rained the entire past year. There's probably enough feed where it's not going to matter. But yeah, definitely in times of drought, this is going to become it's a really important consideration.
So more deer equals less kangaroos. I could live with that.
Less wombats though. And wombats are cool. I like wombats.
You've never been hunting sambar deer in wombat country. Those things sound like a freight train and just the holes everywhere. And
Yeah, but they're cool.
They are. They do have their own environmental impacts and farming land impacts as well, especially in some of the riverland here in South Australia, but that's a totally different discussion.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean for the environment? What's the actual damage done?
It's a good question. So yeah, we need to go back to the understanding that ecosystems evolved over a very long time. Such a long time that I think a lot of people don't really comprehend how long millions of years is. Especially when considering X animal is the new native, when we're considering they've been here 200 years at best, and the ecosystem is millions of years old. It's barely like a raindrop in the stream of time. It's nothing. So in these millions of years, these plants have formed relationships with other plants, with the bacteria in the soil and the animals in that area. And this has a name. These are called biological interactions and are broadly put under two separate categories: short-term interactions and long-term interactions. So your short-term interactions are defined by singular, once-off interaction, and they're really strong drivers of something called co-evolution. So co-evolution is two or more species evolving with each other. So these are predation, where one organism kills and or maybe eats another organism, right? Pollination, where a pollinator will transfer pollen from a male plant to a female plant, and usually they get rewarded in nectar, right? And bees like nectar, right? Then we've got seed dispersal, which we've just talked about, where seeds are transported away from parent plant and then disposed of by the animal in some way or another, and it grows again in a new area. Now, our long-term interactions are known as symbiosis. Okay, very important, and this has many types of relationships within it. So mutualism, where two or more species get a net benefit. So just two interactions with each other, and they both benefit. Commensalism, where one species gets a benefit and the other isn't harmed, but it doesn't benefit at all. And then there's what's the last one? Parasitic relationships, where one benefits and the other is actually harmed. So a parasite, right? Then I don't know how to pronounce it properly because I can't pronounce every single word. But aminosylism, where organisms literally just inflict harm on each other and are in competition for no benefit. And then there's this general competition where overall fitness. Now, fitness in terms of biology isn't like necessarily a stronger animal, but more successful in its reproduction. Competition is overall fitness is lowered by the presence of another organism. So just by another organism being present, your reproductive success is lowered, and that could be for a number of reasons. So the natural environment has evolved over millions of years to form each of these relationships. And the population ecology is determined by these interactions. So this is where balance, that's what balance refers to. And I hate the word balance because it's become a buzzword in these circles. And that's the natural state of the environment, before anthropogenic interactions, so people interactions, our invasive species interactions. The unaccounted for killing of trees, the higher rate of predation upon grasses, and the further spread of plants interrupt these interactions and causes an imbalance. So this can lead to population declines of certain species. It might lead to population increases in other species, which then affects populations of native animals that live there. This then can affect the bacteria in the soil and the rate of nitrogen sequestration, right? So how much nitrogen gets captured, how much carbon dioxide gets captured and then put into the soil, because there's different plants and different bacteria there now, right? And then the overall decomposition rate of decaying plant material gets affected because it's not in balance. The reduction of rate of decomposing of decaying plant material can then increase the risk of fire, right? So if the right bacteria isn't there and the right microorganisms aren't there to decompose all the leaf litter and the dead grasses that might be present, then there's a higher than natural risk of fire. And that's already such a higher risk in Australia. So they might be because of deer being here, there's an increased risk of fire just because of the imbalance they've caused due to the plant communities. Now, what we didn't cover was that these animals fight, and when they fight, they dig up ground and they have bare soil. Okay, and so having bare soil can lead to higher rates of compaction, and that affects the water absorption into the ground. It increases the light penetration, which that means bacteria that really benefit from that, but it might be otherwise harmful, reproduce at a much higher rate. And that could be devastating for the rest of the environment. So the bare ground with less vegetation has a higher risk of soil erosion. Soil erosion is a massive issue worldwide. Higher rates of soil erosion means a less stable area and a higher chance of landslide and more chance of pollution into the waterways. And yeah, those are all pretty bad things. Just by this imbalance.
Yeah, 100%. It's funny you're talking about where deer leave bare soil from when they're setting up scrapes and stuff like that. They're putting beds out. It's the funny thing about it, after they've finished using the scrapes in the rut raw, I quite often see emus nesting in these scrapes on one of the properties in particular I hunt on. So they're not having to dig out their own nest. So these emus are reproducing in these scrapes, and also kangaroos using these scrapes as beds because it's all cleared out and nice. And
but that patch can be killing the grasses and the ferns in that area. And then, not every area has an emu that likes it to bed there. And
it's just something I've picked up in my local.
It's very interesting though. That's really cool.
And I
like that a lot. You've got to consider all these other effects that might be happening as well.
Yeah, there has to be, as well as some negatives, there has to be some positives as well.
It's like a byproduct positive. You know what I mean?
Like it's
like an accidental positive.
Yeah,
rather than something that actually is important. Because that emu would find a place to lie down anyway.
Yeah, definitely.
It's just like, oh hey, this is easy.
Easiness. The deer has already raked out everything, so I just need to sit down here and lay some eggs.
Yeah, exactly.
So mentioning the changes in animal populations, what is this about?
Yeah, so probably heard on other podcasts, other bits of media like documentaries and stuff, that deer have the potential to be something called environmental engineers. This is due to the previously talked about altering of plant communities. And so they completely change a habitat or can. So research has shown that habitats with sambar deer of high and low population densities have had their impact studied. They've shown that areas with high populations have reductions in richness. So richness is a biological term for species diversity. So how many different species there are in an area. Abundance is population numbers, right? So they've had reductions in richness and abundance of small mammal species and reptiles. So the way they measure this is by getting multiple sites of the same type of environment, like we talked about before, and environmental conditions, and working out the deer numbers in the area. Then over a long period of time, it's usually like a year, sometimes a few months, and there's a lot of different styles of traps are set. So these are really fun to use. So one style of trap is called an Elliott trap, which is like this little rectangle box made of like stainless steel, and there's two gates at either side. They're maybe like the things like 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters by maybe 30 centimeters, and you put bait inside of it, and a small mammal will go in and get trapped. Pitfall traps. So a pitfall trap is basically like a bucket in the ground, and then you'll have a small fence that's like 10 centimeters high, going maybe 30 meters along, and then you have all these buckets in the ground along this fence. So small mammals and reptiles run up to the fence, like, hey, I can't cross this. They keep running until they fall into the pitfall trap. And then there's camera traps, and sometimes large traps. So then the animals are collected every single day. So that's a lot of field work. They're usually banded to avoid bias, because some animals are really stupid and just get trapped like every single time. We've had this before, where an animal will just get trapped every single night. It's like, you are an idiot. Stop. So yeah, that's how they measure this reduction in numbers, right? Because they can see that in the areas with high deer, there's a low amounts of these animals being trapped. Areas with low amounts of deer, there's a high amount of these animals being trapped. I hope I said that in the right order. And so yeah, these reductions in numbers are attributed to not just the reduction in food availability, because Samba deer eat a lot. They probably eat a lot more than a small marsupial would.
They are the third largest deer species in the world, so
yeah, they eat a lot more than our small marsupials. But the shelter and nesting sites and building materials that they use. So the deer aren't just eating the food, but driving animals away from the good sheltering spots, right? And so think about this, is like you've said yourself, you've found deer bedded. Where a deer is bedded, maybe a native animal could have been there. Maybe they could have used those materials that were ground up, or that were used in that specific area. So that's how the habitat engineers.
It's funny you say that, but like quite often you see deer and kangaroos bedded together. They work together because kangaroos are the first things to spook, and they'll share the area quite well, from what I've seen anyway in the areas that I hunt. Yeah,
but you got to not just think about the kangaroos, but the tiny little patermelons. Maybe I don't think those animals are near there, but
we don't have
maybe
them.
bandicoots, antechinus, all those smaller animals. It's not just about the megafauna.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I definitely can see that part of things. What about predator impacts? Something that gets talked about a lot in hunting circles, whether it be podcasts, shows, all of that type of stuff, is that the presence of deer, and specifically shot deer, increase the amount of predators, for example, dingoes and foxes. Has this been explored scientifically?
Yes, and I actually have so much more to add since my research for the action plan than what I've got here on our notes. So this is really interesting, and I had so much fun researching this. So the scat, so the poop of wild dogs, foxes, and dingoes gets analyzed by scientists. So that's a less fun part of field work, where they just go out and collect poop.
I don't know. That sounds pretty fun. That's pretty interesting seeing all
that's like a Tuesday for you. It's wild. So, and specifically, this was done in Victoria. This has been done multiple times in Victoria. where all of these animals, all the European introduced carnivores, actually do eat deer. Now, there was a really, really interesting study done on shot deer. So this team of researchers went out with hunters and shot, I think it was like 30 deer over like a week or so. It's a pretty insane effort. And they got the hunters to take all the meat out, right? So the carcasses were left as a normal hunter would leave a carcass, right? So like, a bit of meat here and there and all that.
Gut pile and skin and stuff like that.
Yeah. So the wild dogs and foxes absolutely eat shot deer, and this is really important for later when we talk about my response for like why recreational hunters should be included. Now, what it doesn't prove though is that scavenging directly increases the population of those predators. That hasn't specifically been proven. However, it seems likely because if there's an easy source of food, then they're going to take it. And sudden increases in short-term availability of food can definitely increase population numbers. So I haven't found any research that definitively says deer increases wild dog or dingo or fox numbers. So I don't want to put that out there. But in my opinion, it does seem likely. Now, something really interesting. A scientist proposed in 2000, this hasn't been followed up on because it's probably really hard to actually design an experiment for this, that by opening up the understory of forests, because remember we talked about how they eat the shrub layer and they eat the foliage in the understory, the movement of these predators has been aided in an indirect way, right? So these deer are eating shrubs, they're creating pathways that these foxes and wild dogs can traverse, and it would have been harder if those deer weren't there. That was just proposed by scientists quite a few years ago. It'd be really hard to actually design an experiment to like confirm that.
Yeah,
but it's really interesting.
I'd probably disagree there because kangaroos, they clear paths through the understory, and they're bigger than dogs and foxes as well. So it'd be very hard to.
Yeah, like it's just a really interesting hypothesis that he made up, and like what do you reckon? Have you done much to do with wild dogs in forests?
No, I haven't had any run-ins with wild dogs. I've seen a few dingoes out in the Simpson Desert, but that's about all. I've only hunted Victoria twice, so I had no run-ins with wild dogs out there. So, but on my hunting properties, especially around fawning season, that end of November, December, April, February, you see quite a bit of fox scat with bits of fawns in it, and also wedge-tail eagles. They seem to prey on fawns.
Yeah, makes sense.
Pretty heavily as well because they're that right size. So
yeah. So on that, so think about this because we're talking about like indirect positives, right? You're thinking, look, wedge-tail eagles, easy food source that they're taking. That's good for the wedge-tail eagle, right? That's pretty good. Increased wedge-tail eagle numbers. But now maybe just again this isn't research. This is just like me just freeballing here. If there's an increase in wedge-tail eagle numbers due to them predating on deer, they might be outcompeting the smaller predators. Maybe they could brown goshawks or stuff like that. So it might seem like a positive. Actually, wedge-tail eagles are so cool. So more of them is definitely a positive. But
except for farmers
except for
season.
Farmers. And if you're a brown goshawk, maybe not. If you're a smaller raptor, maybe not. So something on that study where they got those deer. So what they did was they worked with a farmer as well. It was all done in the parks. It wasn't done on any private property, but they put these carcasses in 3 locations. Well, more than 3, but 3 main spots right by the fence of this farm in the park, a certain amount of distance in the park, and then really deep into the forest, right? And you see a kind of like a bell curve being formed on which carcasses were preferred. So the carcasses, so 70% of carcasses were scavenged on by wild dogs, and 60% were scavenged by foxes, right? The wild dogs and foxes preferred the ones that were not deep in the forest and not by the fence, because really deep in the forest is where people go and shoot sambar deer, and where some wild dog population control happens, right? Where they get shot. Right by the fence, well, it's right by a farm, and farmers shoot wild dogs. So they tended to stay away from those. But the one that was the middle distance were the ones scavenged on the most, because it's an area that was least traversed by people shooting wild dogs and foxes. And I thought that was just really interesting.
Was there anything with the relationship with dogs and foxes on these carcasses?
Yeah. So, yeah, actually, yeah. Very few times would you see both at the same carcass, like at the same time. But wild dogs were usually scaring away foxes. The presence of dogs usually meant there wouldn't be a fox in the immediate area of that carcass.
As you would think.
Yeah, it was really interesting. It's really cool how these scientists, these biologists, worked with hunters to do this. You might not appreciate that they shot like 30 of them, but
no, that's
it's for
right.
science.
Like I said, control's fine. Eradication isn't.
Well, it's for science, you know.
Yeah, no, that's fine, and that's citizen science at its best. You know, that's where conservation and hunting and fishing go side by side with conservation. You know,
Yeah.
Whether it be America, whether it be Europe, New Zealand, Australia, Africa, all of these things go side by side, and it seems that scientists, when it's done right, involve hunters with their research.
And we're going to come back to this study when we talk about my response. But think about this. You know, you and someone talk about, or you and heaps of people talk about how in the US, in certain areas, you have an obligation to bring back as much meat as possible, right? So when we're talking about how a sudden availability of edible biomass, right, might increase wild dog population numbers. This is one on deer that had a lot of edible biomass taken out because the hunters, they took as much. So what if there's a hunter who just shot for the trophy, like for the antler trophy, right? What if there's people just shooting them and not taking meat? So we're going to come back to this later. I shouldn't have brought it up, but it's just something to think about, that, maybe there does need to be an obligation to bring back as much meat as possible.
Yeah, it happens, but when you're talking about population controls as well, it's something that's a part of it. On a smaller scale. On a larger scale, it can lead to population increases in wild dogs, like you said. We'll talk about that a bit later. So we talked about how this is mostly going to be a damage done to the environment, the natural environment. However, farms are important. A lot of hunting in Australia is done on private property, on farms. Has the effect on farmers, etc., been studied?
Yeah. So I found 2 major studies on how they affect agricultural infrastructure, right? So that's like fences, barriers, etc. The thing is, these studies were done by talking to the land managers, so the owner of the farm, and otherwise like some sort of production company. and is mostly anecdotal evidence. So it's really hard to publish numbers done on infrastructure. However, there's analysis that were done. There's been some done on. Hang on, so let me go back. It's hard to find actual numbers done to the damage on infrastructure because it's so subjective as well. How a farmer values their time and all that sort of stuff. But what they do to crops and plant-based farms has been studied. There was a study done in Victoria on all of the authority to control wildlife permits issued from 2002 to 2007. So at that time, I don't think you need these permits anymore, but at that time, you needed a permit to shoot deer on private property in Victoria. I'm not sure if that's still a thing or not.
I don't
but
believe
this
so.
study looked at all those authority to control wildlife permits from 2002 to 2007 on deer. Now, the things that came up the most were deer eating specific trees, specific fruits, the vegetables. Some people were saying they're competing for pasture, which, look, does make sense. And destroying crops by trampling and fouling water sources, right? So not like a hard study where they went to farms and just sat there and watched them, but just looking at all the reasons why farmers wanted to shoot deer in that time period, those were what came up the most.
Yeah, stuff like wallowing and in waterways, creeks, and that
Yeah.
can be huge issues. As you said, fences and stuff like that. What about cattle, goats, and other livestock?
Yeah, so remember when we talked about interspecific competition? So, deer eat the same thing that cattle will, right? So there's massive dietary overlap. As far as I could tell, that this hasn't really been studied extensively enough to say, hey, look, if you have deer where your cattle are grazing, that's going to be an issue. But then we come back to the drought situation. That might be an issue because cattle, bring in a lot of money, and if you have deer in an area, look, you might need to get rid of them. So it hasn't been studied enough to say, look, get rid of all the deer that are around your cattle. It just might be a good idea in times of drought.
Then going on from that, spread of disease and pathogens. Australia recently had a scare with a disease in cattle from Indonesia, foot and mouth disease. Is it possible that deer might have any biosecurity ramifications?
Yes, and I found this so interesting to study and research. Biosecurity is so interesting. So due to deer being introduced from overseas, right, from many different areas, from, like you said before, from Asia and from Europe, there's a huge risk of spreading endemic diseases, so diseases that were already here, but definitely exotic diseases. And this can be bacterial-based diseases, viral, or parasitic in nature, right? And this can be harmful to wildlife, it can be harmful to livestock, but there's also some examples where it might be harmful to people, some of the diseases that they might be spreading. This gets reviewed every couple of years by an organization called Animal Health Australia. This has a lot of levels to it. Like I said, this is so interesting to research. So interrupt me at any point to get me to expand more, because this is just so cool. Some protozoan parasites, so really small parasites. So protozoa are tiny microscopic, like one-celled organisms, which are just like living free, and they're usually parasitic in nature and cause a lot of damage. These protozoa, right? So protozoan parasites, they can cause zoonotic diseases in people, and that's been detected even in Australian drinking water in our catchment areas, due to from the deer feces. So deer with these protozoan parasites are pooping around our water catchments, and then this poop is being analyzed, and I don't know this is so hard to pronounce. Cryptosporidium has been detected, and Giardia. I'm sure you know Giardia quite well.
Yep.
And so Giardia, when ingested, causes the runs, makes you poop yourself a lot. And so cryptosporidium can also cause that, as well as a lot of respiratory issues, breathing issues. So the actual risk hasn't really been quantified yet, and it's probably in the lower end, especially because Australia has really high standards of water filtration, like in our I don't know what they're called, just, when they send water to your house. I can't remember what they're called now, even though I did a whole semester on it. Anyway, it's also possible that deer could be carrying Lyme disease. It's not detected, never been detected in Australia, but just because something's not detected doesn't mean it's not here, So it's possible that some might have Lyme. Very unlikely, but the main thing is, which has been detected, is they have cryptosporidium and giardia, and they're pooping in our water.
Do you know if there's been any studies? I know it's been a big thing in the States over the last couple of years with the vid. I won't say the full word because otherwise it will get flagged.
Yeah, there was a study last year or maybe the year before published that deer can at least carry that virus, right?
But in Australia or just the
I don't know if
American?
I don't know if it's been studied in Australian deer, but it's certainly a worry because of just how viruses spread. If they know they can, then they might. So it's certainly a concern. Well, I guess it depends on how concerned you are about the vid, as you say, in the first place, which I haven't got, which is so strange. But I talked to 3 people, so it may be not surprising.
And it's all through the internet.
Yeah, right. But everyone around me has had it, but not me. So look, the main concerns, which has been heavily studied in Australia, are these protozoan parasites that, they might be putting it in our water. Luckily, we have good filtration services, so the risk is low, but it's present. Now, livestock and our wildlife, things I'm more interested in. People getting diseases, whatever. Our animals getting diseases, that's not on. And there's so many points of transmission in this field, this area. So deer worldwide have been shown that they can transmit diseases and parasites to both humans and animals during use of pasture, right? So just by being in the pasture land, they might be able to transmit diseases to your cattle. Or by people. And this can be through the sharing of a water source, right? So if a deer or even a whole herd of deer have some sort of transmittable disease and are sharing a dam or a trough, any other water source, and they're sharing it with cattle, goats, other livestock, the disease might be transmitted just by being in close proximity with them. So building on top of that, working animals, so your border collies and kelpies and stuff, actually can be affected from diseases from deer. An interesting study on hunting dogs, so to bring it back to hunting, an interesting study on hunting dogs from eastern to northern Australia has shown that hunting dogs, most retrieval, tracking, and pig dogs, can and have caught, this has been detected, zoonotic diseases directly from deer and can die from them. And that's not cool because I love my dog, and I would not want that to happen, right?
I wouldn't call your dog a hunting dog though, but
no, he's an idiot. He was meant to be a hunting, tracking and retrieval dog, but even the vet says he's unintelligent for his breed, so that's okay. Now, so they can also transmit the disease to livestock, to working dogs, so the property owner's dog, wildlife, and people. This varies in probability depending on the area and the species, etc. But I don't know. It's really important. And so, talking about diseases that deer actually have and also have verifiably had and spread within Australia is leptospirosis. Leptovirus is the short term as how to say it. So it's a disease that can cause fever and headaches and chills and aches in people. People can catch it, but dogs catch it a lot. So if you've got a dog, usually you get like parvovirus in vaccine in your C3 and C5, but you can go to the vet and get C7, which is a vaccine for lepto, and it's really important. Like Northern Territory and Queensland really need, like, you need to get lepto vaccine for your dog. So it can cause death if not treated in dogs and definitely in people. Now in Victoria, Samba, fallow, and hog have actually had active testing for lepto antibodies, and they've all tested negative. But rooster deer have tested positive for leptospirosis virus antibodies, which means they've been exposed to this virus. So actively, rooster deer in Victoria, they might have this virus. Doesn't mean that all of them have it, and it doesn't mean that Samba, fallow, and hog don't have it. It just means that Samba, it's been detected in rooster, like it's actively been confirmed to be in rooster, in Victorian deer, in Victorian rooster deer. And just hasn't been found yet in Samba deer in Victoria. Now, Queensland red deer, and again, this doesn't mean all, but some have been shown to have leptovirus antibodies and acabane virus antibodies. And this can affect, there's been a few other diseases as well that can affect livestock and other animals. So I just talked for a long time.
No, all good. It's all good. It's good for you to be able to have this space for you to go down every rabbit hole that you need, so that way hunters and anyone else that is listening to this podcast have a decent understanding of the whole biologist side of things when looking into all of this type of stuff. What precautions are being taken to prevent the spread of disease?
So this comes down to the individual, right? So I'm definitely not saying to stop harvesting deer. Okay, don't do that. Keep shooting deer, please, and take your dogs, because studies have shown hunters with dogs, like in Australia, are more successful than without. That's just a whole other thing. Anyway, so what's really important, what's most important here is hygiene. Now, I know a lot of people, including yourself, want to be like as manly, as tough, as primal as possible, and it feels nice to work with your bare hands, right? We're not going down that path.
Sorry, you said primal, and that's the first thing that popped in.
I know, right? And like you want to get your hands bloody. It feels good. And like that's what our ancestors did. I understand that. I've done that myself, right? But when talking about the health of our dogs, not on, right? So unfortunately, we have this situation where doing it the primal way might be harming ourselves, it might be harming our dogs, and might be spreading diseases. It might also be harming the farmer's livestock and the farmer's pets, if you're on private property. And that's not cool, because cattle are livestock's expensive, and you don't want to be putting yourself in a position where you might accidentally, unknowingly expose livestock to diseases. So, our biosecurity precautions. I've done an article on Eureka Tactical about what you can do to prevent spread of diseases. First, well, mostly just about biosecurity. First, a good plastic rubbish bag is good, which you need, because rubber gloves, but preferably nitrile, should be used when you're cutting up a deer. I know, I can see your face. You're like, I don't want to use rubber gloves, but you also don't want to poison your friend's cattle. But I don't know, man. Like, you might be exposing your hands to this disease. Then you go talk to the farmer, and your pet is border collie. I love border collies. You might be giving them lepto. You know what I mean? So you've got your rubber gloves on, because we're taking biosecurity precautions and we're not spreading diseases.
Bacterial hand wash, mate. Bacterial hand wash. less less
That's a different conversation
less
to do with
pollution,
sanitizers versus detergents.
less pollution.
But take off your gloves afterwards, put them in this plastic rubbish bag. That way, that you've been as secure as possible. Most importantly, the most important thing you can do for biosecurity is clean your boots, especially if you're going from an area to an area. Clean your boots. Seriously. So many diseases, not just the ones we're talking about right now, can carry on your boots. And pasture dieback is a massive one where people are going from property to property, they're bringing this disease, and the whole pasture is dying. But anyway, so clean your boots. Generally with a light detergent is what I use, because I have leather boots, so it doesn't soak in anything, so my boots aren't wet. I know I used to have like Merrells, and like if you wash them, they're wet for a very long time, but not with these leather boots. So get a light detergent, spray yourself down with after you've washed with a sanitizer. A good brand is like F10 because it's veterinary grade. When you leave town, get your car washed, because that water is staying in that area. And then if there's diseases, they'll get filtered out in that local area, and you're not transporting a disease from the hunting ground to your house or from property to property. Look, I understand that there's a lot of pride in being dirty and have a dirty vehicle and stuff, but look, there's no pride in transmitting diseases and bacteria, viruses, and seeds, especially I've talked to a farmer today. I've been talking to him a lot about this sort of stuff, and he takes these precautions. He doesn't let anyone on his property who hasn't cleaned his shoes. Like up north in the banana farms, you can't enter a property without going through a car wash that's on the property first. And you have to have a different pair of shoes for town and for the property. Right, because this sort of stuff is really important.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. Like, the Adelaide Hills is a very orchard, vineyard rich place, and the last 5, maybe 6 years, you've been seeing a lot of the farm biosecurity signs going up. There's one vineyard I drive past all the time, and it's got a big, like almost for sale sign, but it's like, please respect our farm biosecurity, don't wander through the vines, this is the reasons why it's not good to do it, and this is the types of things you can track through the vineyards and diseases you can give the vines, which affects the grape harvest, which affects the wine that you want to come up here and drink.
Yeah, it's so important. And I know it seems like a little thing. It's like, oh, my boots are a little bit dirty. Oh, there's this. Like, it's just a bit of dirt. Like, it's not. Unfortunately, it's not. It's not just a bit of dirt. It might be dirt that's got diseases in it. And like when you're skinning this deer or whatever, you might be getting this stuff on you and your clothes. And then you go onto a different property, you go into a different shire, and you've just transmitted a disease. And look, I get it. It's unfortunate, because I know like everyone wants to be that, a dude who's just in with his bare hands and stuff, and like his car is dirty, full of dirt, like, but it's just the world we live in,
I just don't think it's something that's common knowledge. It's not a pride thing. It's just, like, even myself, it's not something I really think about. You go into a property, you flick your boots off when you finish, you chuck them in your car, you get home, you chuck them in your garage or your shed, or it's not something that's really thought about per se, unless you're in an environment where the farmers are really cracking down on that type of thing anyway.
Yeah, but this isn't specifically about deer now, but just a property owner will appreciate, even if they didn't ask you to do it, if you take the initiative and be like, hey, just so you know, like, I've got these things going on to make sure I'm not harming your property. And to bring it back to deer, like, deer can carry these diseases, and it's just something to think about. I know, like, the risk is low, but it's not zero.
Yeah, it's definitely something to be mindful of. When I've travelled overseas to New Zealand and Mexico, it's something that they check. They check your shoes for any grass seeds. If there's any bit of dirt on it, they'll chuck it in a wash for you. Tents, stuff like that. So They check all that for grass seed, clothes, socks.
Yeah.
And, it's something that I've noticed here too. Not long ago, like, it's interesting we're speaking about this because one of the farms that I hunt, they had lease farmers on it. And, it was a pretty well looked after farm up until the lease farmers came on it. And they came from they brought stock down from properties a few hours away. And this property never had Salvation Jane on it. And then since these farmers graze sheep on it, this property is littered with Salvation Jane now.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, it's a sucky thing because it sucks to walk in. It's,
right.
It's pretty itchy. But the other day, I had a Salvation Jane plant pop up in my driveway where I've washed down the car in my driveway. So that's just a prime example of it.
Yeah, that's a real first-hand example of exactly what I'm talking about. Now imagine if you picked up lepto from a deer and you don't have a dog, but maybe let's say you did. Man, you'd feel pretty sucky if you accidentally poisoned your own dog.
Yeah, I've never heard of lepto up until this point, so it's definitely something I'm going to have to.
It's rampant through Queensland and Northern Territory.
Yeah, that's Queensland, Northern Territory. There's lots of things rampant up in that way.
It's true. It's true.
Like you saying Shire, and there's a few other ways you pronounce stuff that I've been having a giggle at as when you say it.
All right.
Like Shires aren't a thing down here.
You say not really think here anymore.
The way you say cool as well.
Okay.
Cool.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's a good laugh anyway. So back onto like soil, water, and nutrients and stuff. Back to the effect on the environment and the last on that topic. What about their effects on soil and waterways?
I love soils. I literally right next to me, not for this podcast, just because I have the Australian Soils and Land Survey book and Australian Soil Classification book because I just love soils so much.
I totally thought you were going to pull out a jar of dirt then and quote Jack Sparrow for a second.
Oh, I should have done that. No, but that's too much of setup. I'm not definitely doing it. I love soils.
I didn't think it was going to be a setup. I just thought you're that type of guy, just to have a jar of dirt.
I am that type of guy, but there's massive security risks involved in that, so I wouldn't. So, like, soil is everything around us, right? It's what forms our life, and it's everything to do with soil is highly qualitative, which means it's kind of subjective because I can do a whole podcast about soils. But to identify a soil, it's not like a species of animal where you can get its DNA. It's to do with like the structure and the color and all this other stuff. So I did a whole subject called soils and the environment, like I said before. And when I was doing it, I was like, I have to study soil for a whole semester. That's like dirt. But it's actually so interesting. So like how a deer isn't just a deer, right? There's orders to soil. There's 15 different types of soil in Australia, according to the guide like I just showed you, right? And they each have generally like 8 subcategories. There's so many different types of soil. And a soil type is determined by its clay content, particle size, structure, how much water it can absorb, its pH, the water pore size, so the pores within the soil, salinity, which is the salt content, and so much more. Okay, and this is really important to say how they affect the soil. Soils are formed by a process called pedogenesis, which is the formation of soil. Right, it's formed from the weathering of rocks and all this other stuff. Is influenced by weathering, by rain. And biological interactions. Okay, so plants, animal, fungal, and other biological interactions help make what a soil is. So fall soil gets formed alongside all of this other biota across the millions of years that we talked about before to get to where it is today, to get to the same spot where the animals and the plants are. Now, how does the soil become unhealthy? Because it's like dirt's just dirt. How it actually does have a health. Is by the unnatural removal of plant material and interactions of invasive species. So the aforementioned higher rates of predation amongst certain plants, which kills the plants, and that means lower amounts of carbon going into the ground, the nitrogen levels going into the ground, and it's altering the amount of minerals that are normally found in that soil. Okay, so one of the most important things, probably not the most important thing I learned, but it's so interesting, is compaction. Okay, so when you stand on soil, it compacts. Soils have something called a water-filled pore space, WFPS, which is the ratio of volumetric soil water content to total soil porosity. So, like a sponge, think of a sponge, right? It can hold a certain amount of water. So there's these pores underground that get filled with water. These pores have 3 different sizes: macropores, mesopores, and micropores. So roots will dig through the soil. They find these pores to get to the water, and that provides structure to the soil, to everything underneath you. So the issue occurs is still compaction, where frequent downward force compacts these pores. So something that might have mesopores or macropores rather gets compact into mesopores, and that might get compact into micropores. So the plants then can't penetrate the soil and then can't grow. So no water penetration. Like if it's too compacted, there's no water penetration as well as no plant penetration. Okay, so if there's no water penetration, that means it's a hard surface. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, so if there's a hard surface, water sits on top. Or if it's on a slope in times of rain, creates a runoff. This is really bad. This is really, really bad. So think about this. Deer walking along causes compaction. I know you're thinking like kangaroos and all this, but we've mentioned before, this is an extra layer. Plus, kangaroos spread out their weight a lot more evenly, and like they hop and all that sort of stuff, whereas deer have, this amount of surface area, like a fist-sized amount of surface area for the whole body weight compacting down.
Hard hooves versus soft padded feet as well. So.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it's also just extra among what the soil's already taken. So deer compacting the soil as they're walking can create a track, especially if they're in high numbers. And you see this with cattle all the time. It creates a hardened trail. This trail can then capture rainfall, right? And this can create like a stream as the rain goes, and if it's downhill, creates a stream. As the rain continues, like all of Australia had this last year, this creates a gully, and that's called a gully erosion. So as the water erodes away the gully, it gets bigger and bigger. This can create landslides. So I actually worked on a farm that lost an entire paddock due to this effect. Now, I'm not saying that deer will always do this, but it's something that deer can cause. Have you seen before these tracks that deer, cattle, and stuff can make?
Yeah, not so much. I've seen the tracks, but not the erosion side with deer. Feral goats, definitely. But more so on this property that I was talking about, where they were overrunning and overgrazing sheep, and they grazed the paddock.
Problem.
They grazed the paddocks bare, and then we had a couple of dry summers. The paddocks were bare, and then we've just had a massive rains throughout the last 6 months. So I've seen a lot of the erosion effect happening.
Yeah, definitely. And when I've brought this up, people be like, "Oh, cattle do that, goats do that." It's like, yeah, I know, and yes, but deer do it too, and it's just trying to outline the effects that deer can be a contributing factor. So back to the studies, right? So because deer like to concentrate around sources of water, a lot of observational studies have shown that a lot of conservation departments going back like 30 years have shown deer go around these water sources. And because they're continuously traveling to these water sources, these hard surfaces are being made by deer. Now, there's been no direct linkage. No direct linkage has been made to degradation that was caused solely by deer. It's just known as one of the driving factors, right? Deer have been shown to cause a lot of compaction and gully erosion in areas that are particularly vulnerable. So areas that are already vulnerable to certain types of erosion, such as low-lying areas and like around water, they have been shown as a major driving factor towards more erosion and they particularly damaging. So the most of the concern in this area is if the area is highly localized, then the consequences can be really severe. So they're not the only thing that's causing this. Other things are as well. But again, it's just extra things that environment has to handle. A study following rooster deer recorded localized erosion in the soil. But like again, they know that there's other herbivores in the area, since those herbivores may have historically already been there where rooster were not. So it's just another thing. So they're not exactly. I'm not saying like deer are the sole cause of gully erosion all the time. That is a massive factor in this equation.
Yeah, definitely.
And I like talking about soil, so I just had to include it.
So, what do we do? Like, that's the damage that deer do to the Australian environment. It can be quite damaging, more than what is commonly thought of in hunting circles and Australian hunting media. Before we have our own conversation on what we think we should be implemented, have there been any studies on how effective recreational hunting is compared to culling?
There have. So I think before we talk about this, because I used a lot of that research in my submission to the National Feral Deer Action Plan, and I think we definitely do need to talk about that. I want to ask you, Ian, so what have you learned so far, I guess? And then, if there's something that you've learned, like a cause of damage that you didn't know about, has that sort of changed any of your thinking?
Look, so I knew most of the base points on what we covered. When it comes to damage, yep, I knew all of these things had a factor in it, especially when mixed in with, areas where there's populations of several species, of introduced species, as well as cattle and sheep and everything else that goes into the factor. Probably my biggest takeaway so far on it, and it's probably something I'm going to be more conscientious of, is the pathogen side of stuff and the disease stuff.
Right.
Giving my boots a scrub in between properties, and possibly giving my car a squirt off before going to a property. That's probably my biggest takeaway in it, because I knew a bunch of this stuff, especially with the soil science side of stuff, doing that conservation land management course. That was a major subject in that course. So,
yeah. Would you say that, like I said, my experience before going to uni and stuff is I was just reading and listening to a lot of people, Australian hunters, talk about deer, and they're like, hey, yeah, we shouldn't cull them because they don't really do anything. And I know in the past year of listening to you, listening to Sendermate podcast, that there has been more of an acknowledgement that they do damage. I'm kind of just disproving my own point, but would you say the hunting community, as have I said anything tonight that would be in contradiction to the general thoughts of the hunting community in Australia?
Well, I can't speak for the community itself. You know,
You are a figurehead,
yeah,
and you represent every single Australian deer hunter right now.
like I've said in the past, you know, as a kid, you know, every free choice project that I got to do on anything always revolved around environment, conservation, introduced species, whether it was, you know, not so much deer when I was younger because there wasn't as many deer as there are now, especially in South Australia. Like, they've really skyrocketed in the last 15 to 20-ish years. But, you know, like I said, all of my studies throughout school was introduced species, the impacts they done, control methods, you know, because I grew up shooting feral goats, foxes, rabbits, hares, cats, you know, the works as a kid. So I knew a lot of the environmental impacts, especially like the predator side. And that's the type of stuff that I'd focus on when I did these school projects and, you know, showing teachers and other students. And that's the stuff that I focused on. So I knew a lot of this stuff. But when it comes down to like the control of deer and the eradication of deer and stuff like that, it's more focused on the emotional side for myself, as they are such a iconic animal to me. And that's where it's always been a conflict, is that conservation versus emotion. And I don't think a lot of hunters can put that into words. They have this love for an animal. But then again, you speak to some hunters, you see it on Facebook, on groups. I would never shoot anything that's not a pest. You know, so there is that side of things as well. Like, I'd never go to Africa because those animals are native, and I'm never going to shoot them because they're not pests. I'm never going to go to America because they're natives and they're not pests, you know. I only shoot stuff for conservation because they're non-native. So there is that side of stuff as well. But I think emotions overtake a lot of the science when it comes to a lot of it.
I would agree. There was a post in one of the groups maybe a few weeks ago. A dude shot a deer that was still like in velvet, and so many comments were like, and I'm sure a lot of it's like in jest, but there's a seriousness to it as well. People saying like you should have let it grow, and all that sort of stuff. And the dude's just like, actually a lot of it was serious. Because I talked on I commented, I'm like, hey man, I was the only person in like 50 comments to be like, hey, you shot your first deer, that's super cool, ignore the haters and stuff. And this dude said he got heaps of DMs of people like hating on him because he shot this deer that wasn't like fully grown out yet and stuff. I remember back in the day when more people would post more kills, I guess, in the groups. Someone shot on their own property. I think it was like 3 does, like in this, like just like a once kind of deal.
Yeah. And
posted it and got so much hate because it's like, oh, you know, you're reducing the numbers now. Like future hunters won't have any kind of deal. And this dude's like, well, this is my own property, and two, like I'm trying to get rid of him. And it's just really interesting. I guess none of them are specifically saying they don't cause damage, so it's not really relevant to this discussion. But
just
I find it interesting.
Going off of the stag, right? Half-grown stag, buck, whatever it was. How many does, hinds did that? Like you see it, like these people they're like, this is my first stag that I've shot. This is my first, but there might have been a spiker with it. There might have been a hind with it. There might have been a doe with it. They might have driven, like, ran a spotlight past like 5 does, and they go, oh, there's a stag, it's half grown, so they've shot that instead. So they've got this somewhat pride going, I've shot a stag. So that's where those comments going, oh, it would have been good to see its potential, you should have given it another year or two. I hate those comments, but
Okay.
if you're shooting something that's half grown, there's a good chance that you've passed up hinds and does and spikes and that before you've shot something. And it's not going to be always the case, but there's a good chance before you've shot that animal that you've passed up other animals to shoot that one, and then you're backing yourself into a corner going, oh, it's just for conservation, it's just for meat, it's just for that. If you wanted meat, shoot a few does, shoot a few hinds, shoot a spike. There's it's just
really interesting, and I don't think he deserved as much hate as he got.
Yeah, it depends. Like, some of it, you see people's attitudes towards it when they post photos up, and you're like, yeah, that's probably not the best attitude to have, and they cop flag. Some people are generally excited that they've shot their first deer and it just happened to be a half-grown stag or a buck or whatever, and it's just shed its antlers or it's half-grown or whatever. It's a mixed thing, because you've got these people that want good deer to be grown. Like, I just love deer in general. Shooting a massive one would be awesome, but I love shooting a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old. It's all venison. It's all venison in my freezer at the end of the day. But everyone's like, if you want to shoot a bigger one, you have to pass the smaller ones to let the bigger ones grow as well. So it's just a complete different rabbit hole.
So I think it's the federal government has sponsored a working group to put together this plan called the National Feral Deer Action Plan, which is really interesting.
Yep.
And it's a proposal. This working group is made up of industry bodies, of scientists from different state departments, a shooting industry body, and a few stakeholders. And they've put together this proposal on on ways to reduce deer population numbers, right? Now, it's not like a law that they're proposing or anything like that. It's just like ways to reduce deer population numbers, actions and measures that can be taken that I guess they hope each state takes up, and then landholders take up, so each state can reduce deer numbers. So it's very interesting. How do you think the Australian populace should deal with deer? And then we'll talk about how these people think we should deal with deer.
Look, it's a hard one. I want there to be deer forever and always, for myself to hunt, for my friends to hunt, for my children to hunt, as I love deer, and they're such a amazing animal to have on the landscape. They're a pretty animal. They're just awesome to watch. I love even going out and not shooting them. I love sitting out there and just watching them interact with each other.
They smell bad.
No, they don't. Not compared to.
I've just got this fact in my head, and I just need to put it out there. So deer do this thing called self-anointing. Red deer mostly. It's a mating method. Right?
Most bucks and stags do that during the mating season, but it doesn't smell as bad as when feral goats do it.
Goats are way worse. But just for everyone who's like, deer are so majestic, just have this in your head, okay? A stag or a buck will be bending down. He's getting ready to go to town. He's getting ready to meet some does. Get the doe hose ready, and he pees all over his face.
Yep.
Just fire hose
Pheromones,
pees all over his face. Sometimes they'll pee on the ground and then roll in it. And then they go and pick up chicks. That's their method. It's called self-anointing. Just any time you're like, hey, yeah, deer are majestic. I'm like, yeah, they also pee on themselves. I'm not really into it. I guess you are, but
Who isn't?
yeah, it's interesting. You call it majestic, and
They are. They're, as Rogan puts it, I know he mainly talks about elk, how he puts it, but they're a forest cow with swords on their head that drop off and grow back every year. And the males
it's very cool.
The males are friends for most of the year until the rut and roar, and then they're trying to kill each other and succeeding.
Yeah, I mean, same. Going
well.
into the valley with my friends. Hey, like, we're not friends right now. Yeah, you're right. It's very interesting. So,
but yeah,
given that,
coming back to the population, like the controlling side of stuff,
yeah,
it's a hard one. Like, there's properties that I hunt where they go, well, not so much hunt, but I pest control on. They want every deer shot, so you go there purely for pest control. Where there's other properties that I hunt where they like seeing the deer, but you're managing the numbers. I definitely think numbers should be managed, but I don't think they should be brought onto the brink of extinction, so to say, in these environments where they are. Because
what's management to you?
Controlled numbers where you can still go out, take a couple when you need to.
Okay.
And there's, enough on the landscape for them to keep reproducing, but you can still control so they're not getting out of control.
I mean, I understand that. Yeah, for sure. So who's doing this? And you're the supreme leader of Australia, of deer.
Okay.
Who's the one doing this killing?
If I'm supreme leader, we're sending every anti-hunter vegan type to another country. We're bringing all of the American hunting.
That's why I said of deer.
Joking.
You're in control of who is killing these deer.
Hunters.
And controlling these numbers. Okay.
Just hunters. It's hard whether you'd bring in, and I know you hate hunters bringing this up, but a North American model of conservation side, we see it with hog deer in Victoria. They have a somewhat North American model of wildlife for that species to look after the species, because we've got the world's only huntable population. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's conservation. It's not supposed to be based on people's feelings. It's supposed to be based on evidence and science.
Does that include hunters' feelings?
Yes. I'm saying that. I'm man enough to admit it. And I've said this whole time, and in the other times we've talked, it's comes down to how I feel about them and my feelings on them.
Yeah, that's cool.
Which is something as hunters we need to start admitting. Not minimizing the damage they do and the populations and how we feel about it all. We have to put our hearts on wear our hearts on the sleeve type thing, and this is how we feel about them. This is why we want them around. Yes, they are damaging in some aspects, but yeah,
I would agree. Not with the North American model conservation part, because it is not relevant to Australia. But to the part where hunters need to, I think, I don't like to generalize, but I'm about to. The hunting community in general, like I said, my experience is that minimize the amount of damage deer actually do. Like I said, for some things I've brought up today, I've been attacked, not like in a literal sense, physically. They're
Guilty.
Fucking pussies. But online, keyboard warriors will call me anti-gunner, anti-hunter and stuff. And, like I said at the start, none of you, maybe 10 people in Australia do more for gun laws than I do for Australia. So, and it's just because, look, some people don't want to accept that they do damage to the environment. But because of the recreational hunting community, the vocal part of the community has not accepted that they do damage. and that their numbers need to be massively reduced to help the environment, is why the recreational hunting community has been left out of this plan, and why we might be in a little bit of a predicament. So, what's this plan? Like I said, it's a working body that's put together a plan on how to tackle the deer issue. Like I said, they do damage, and they're in massive numbers. They've increased massively in the past few decades. So the plan is to stop the spread of large populations of deer and reduce their impact. That's a pretty good goal. Goal 2 is to control or eradicate small populations before they spread. That's a very basic tenet of invasion ecology. And protect significant sites from impacts. Those are all honorable goals, and I think good goals. But they don't want hunters to do it. Their proposed methods, and go and read this plan, don't have someone else interpret it for you, because all of the commentary I've seen so far has focused on the wrong things and have misinterpreted it and put out wrong information to the community. And I think it's damaging, but I'm not going to go into that. So they want professional colors to be used, professional shooters, they call them. They want people to become volunteer shooters to cull deer. And I like volunteers, that's good. But a volunteer shooter and a recreational hunter are two different things. Even though like recreational, they say we encourage our recreational hunters to become volunteer shooters because it's shoot, drop, and leave. They're proposing, they're talking about helicopter culls, increased helicopter culls. And look, that's they're all valid tools. Like all of these are valid tools, and they're encouraging the research and development of new baits and poisons. I bring that up specifically because the hunting community keeps talking about, oh my God, they're talking about using more 1080. No, they're talking about developing new poisons and new types of baits, not using 1080. These haven't been developed yet. We don't know their response, and I don't want poisons to be used at all. But I just hate all the commentary. Like, oh my God, if they poison the deer, it's going to do this and this and this. It's like you don't know what poison they're going to use because they don't know what poison they're going to use because it hasn't been invented yet.
Yeah, I'm just against
it hasn't been
poisons and viruses.
Yeah, look, I'm against them being poisoned as well, but the commentary now is people acting as if they're going to have widespread use of 1080, but that's not what the plan says at all. It's just something that's annoying me all the time. Yeah. But they're proposing the use of all these different tools and not recreational hunting, because they believe that recreational hunters' beliefs aren't aligned with conservation values. And look, when you look at the community from afar, they're right. Okay. That might trigger some people, but they're right. And that's recreational hunting as a tool don't take enough numbers. And that I disproved using science. But before we get into that, look, we're in a situation now where there's this working body that purposely didn't include recreational hunters because of the hunting community's attitudes. So whether you believe the science or not, it's kind of irrelevant because these guys, if it gets approved, if the states take up this plan, it's going to go ahead with or without hunters. And if hunters, don't change their attitudes, it's going to continue to happen. Look, and it doesn't matter if you believe it or not. It's just this is proof that our community's own actions and words that they've put out, not believing the science about the damage deer do, has just put the government in a position of being like, okay, you guys sit at the kids' table, the adults are here, and we're just gonna do this without you.
Yeah.
So again, I just talked quite a lot.
No, that's good. That's good.
You wanna
No, I think you've
interject with anything?
no. Look, I no, I say a lot of smart ass remarks for the comedy of things and my personal feelings of things, but I think you covered it pretty well there. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
Well, like I said, I disproved some of their points using science, and I'm going to go over what I don't agree with them with. So I submitted on behalf of myself and Eureka Tactical. So this plan is open for submissions. So if you have any thoughts on the plan and you can articulate them well, submit it. If you can't articulate it well, I mean, I don't want to say, don't have interactions with politicians and stuff, but if you're just going to be like, oh, you guys are all idiots, include hunters, I don't think that's gonna push them to include hunters. But if you can put together something pretty good, definitely submit it to them so we can get more people representing us. Basically, the plan says that recreational hunting and hunters are not suitable to be included due to the population too high to be controlled by hunting, and that recreational hunting is in contrast with best practices to do with conservation. And like I said, I agree that the community, like you said, they want deer, but wanting deer means they're just not going to include you, like what they've done. So in my submission I talked about that recreational hunting is ground shooting and proved how effective ground shooting can be. So long as you have identifiable goals, and ground shooting is a really good tool for population suppression, right? And we want recreational hunting to be the tool. Like I said, all of those tools, poisons, arrow culling, all valid. We just want recreational hunting to be the most valid and the most used, right? So there was a study that compared contract shooters to volunteer shooters. So their time in the field, their effectiveness. The effectiveness means killing, like how many animals can they kill in a certain amount of time and per effort. And they did this in Victoria. It's a very good study. And in my article, I'll make sure to link it. Contract shooters cost the state 75% more than volunteers. So volunteer shooters still have a cost to state because of like accommodation. They might get their fuel reimbursed, food, etc. But when operations included contract shooters, there was only 55% increase in effectiveness. And again, effectiveness is amount of animals killed. So then you got to consider what are the differences between the two. Like one, contractors make money, so they're spending more money on their guns. They have more access to thermals because you're getting paid to do it rather than being a truck driver who then has to afford thermals. It's like, this is your job, so you're going to make sure you have the best.
Yeah.
They also have access to suppressors and self-loading firearms, right? So that 55% increase is outside of volunteer shooters' control. But only a 55% increase in effectiveness when 75% costs more, I don't think is good enough. And like I said, this is a study done. So like university people, whoever went out and tagged along with these people, and they included the ADA, the volunteer shooters were all ADA people. So it's very interesting, right? And the scales were tipped in the contract shooters' favor. Now, the thing is, like I said, the difference between volunteer shooters and recreational hunters is recreational hunters actually contribute to the economy. So a volunteer shooter has a cost per kill, even if it's very low because only the fuel and food and accommodation is being reimbursed. Whereas a recreational hunter is paying all of it. It's paying in. So a study was done in a few years ago, in 2014, showed that the average Australian hunter directly spends about $1,800 on hunting, and indirectly about $2,100 on hunting. That was 2014. That was a long time ago. So it's definitely a lot more now. So that's something that's really got to be considered, and that's what I included. Now, when we're talking about recreational hunting as a tool for population suppression, I know that the goal of recreational hunting is to have deer there still, and don't want to eradicate them. So we need recreational hunters to be part of this and just outline, hey, we will do this, but we're not going to kill all of them. And we need to prove that they are actually doing a really good job right now of suppressing their numbers. And I proved that. So we're going to use Victoria as an example. And that's what I did. I used Victoria as an example because heaps of studies are done in Victoria. The GMA, some people hate it, but I think it's a wonderful tool because it proves our point so well. So hats off to the GMA, actually. They might save guns. A study was done over an 11-year period from 2009 to 2019, analyzing how many new deer hunters there are in that state. And the amount of hunting licenses increased from 16,000 to just under 42,000 in that 2009 to 2019 period. That's a huge amount. And then just 2019 to 2021, it increased from just under 42,000 to just under 50,000 people endorsed for deer hunting. And that's correlated with a 49% increase in deer harvest over the average since 2009. So more deer hunters recreationally means more deer are being killed. I mean, that makes sense. Just in my document, I proved it. This plan says that the numbers are just too high for recreational numbers, for recreational hunters to really suppress. So Victoria has an estimated 1 million deer. 3,000 of these are hog deer, approximately. But there's no numbers on how many sambar deer there are, how many shittle, how many fallow, etc., etc. But studies over the world actually use deer hunters' take to infer whole populations. So in 2021, Victorian recreational hunters harvested just under 119,000 deer in total. And just under 69,000 of that were sambar deer. And so that's just under 58% of the total harvest. So we can infer that 58% of that 1 million deer are sambar deer. That's like 580,000 sambar deer in Victoria. So with recreational hunters killing 69,000 sambar deer, and there being 580,000, that's just under 12% of the total deer population. That 12% is really important because populations increase by something called intrinsic rate of increase. So that's how many more deer or any organism are entering that population in a given year or a given time span, right? Deer reproduce once a year, so it's yearly, very easy to work out. And that accounts for natural mortality. Now, sambar deer in Victoria have had their intrinsic rate of increase analyzed, and it's between 15 and 24% a year, right? And they say that 13 to 19% need to be killed each year just to maintain a stable population. So to keep the numbers exactly the same, around 13 to 19% of that population need to be killed. But deer hunters are taking 12%. So we're already taking between 62 and 91% of the deer required to be taken just to maintain a stable population. That's so many. That's over half the job done already, right?
That's awesome.
So yeah, recreational hunters are doing enough of a job, almost the entire job already of just maintaining a stable population. We only need a little bit more to induce a population decline. And, you know, yeah, I think we should introduce a population decline because of all the factors we've talked about over the past 3 hours, the damage in the environment. We just need hunters to be the ones who are doing it.
Yeah.
So the plan really needs to focus on getting hunters out into the field more. That might displease some people who don't want more hunting on public lands. But if you don't, then they're just going to do it. They're going to hire helicopters. They're going to put money into contract shooters. Another major problem I have with this is the aforementioned dog problem, right? So we've talked about the studies. If they just have a shoot and drop policy, which is what culling has, at least in Queensland, cullers aren't allowed to take meat. And I'm pretty sure that's the rules in Victoria as well. The cullers aren't allowed to take meat. Then there's going to be so much edible biomass for these dogs to scavenge on. If there's a possible increase in population numbers just due to a hunter kill that's taking most of the meat, then there's definitely going to be an increase in wild dog numbers when there's just all this like deer that's being killed and none of the meat's been 100%. Taken. Who's going to take the meat? Wild dogs. So they need to include recreational hunting in all of their plans. So when it comes down to what should we do is have more recreational hunting. The states need to open up more land.
100% agree there.
Man, like you rag on about me like not going deer hunting, but it's like, bro, the closest deer I can hunt if I don't pay $3,000 is like however far Cody is from me. Like
Bathurst.
I think it's like an 18-hour drive. So the closest deer I have to me that I can hunt easily is 18 hours away, unless I want to pay hundreds to thousands of dollars. So Queensland opens up like a Victorian-style system. That's more hunters out there taking more deer. So how they can say recreational hunters aren't doing a good enough job, it's like, bro, that's because we can't do anything. We can't go anywhere. Only Victorians and New South Wales people can go there easily.
And even
like unless you have properties, etc.
Even New South Wales system isn't as great as Victoria's system.
Right.
A lot of the states could learn from Victoria with their hunting and fishing. Wild.
Everybody hates Victoria, but they have the best hunting system. Like everybody hates the GMA, but it's like they're the ones who facilitate it.
They don't hate Victoria. They hate Victorians, and more specifically, Melbourne.
True. But I mean, it's like the GMA gets so much hate. But they're the only government organisation that really facilitates so much hunting. New South Wales DPI does in their programs, and they actually tried last year to do better, and were shot down. And if you remember all that stuff,
I remember.
But yeah, like open up more hunting. So I think that what we should do is have more recreational hunting. I think the community needs to accept that deer numbers are insane at the moment and are causing a lot more damage than you might acknowledge or want to acknowledge. But so yeah, we do need a massive population decline. I just think that deer hunters, like recreational hunters, need to be the ones who are doing it and can be the ones who are doing it very easily with just more access.
Yeah, access seems to be the biggest thing. We just need a Victorian-style approach to public lands in every state. Yeah,
and look, use these other tools as well. If there's a new outbreak in an area, especially in like a high-value area, like use a helicopter. Just make sure that can be followed up by some butchers or something, you know? Like, use that meat.
Oh, even like hunters for the homeless programs they have in America where they go do all the chopper shooting, like especially Ted Nugent and Pigman. they go out, chopper shoot all of these pigs, but they go and recover every single one of them, take them to a processor, and then they go feed the homeless throughout Texas.
And that's so good.
Like, even something like that, and I've argued it many times with people, like, you know, even if they had someone going through after the chopper culls and, you know, fed the homeless populations in Adelaide, Victoria, all of these places, it would be
like some of those places, they use the chopper because you can't get out there on foot, but not every place. Not every place they use the chopper, you know what I mean? Like,
you can if you're tough. These guys up in the choppers aren't tough.
Still, you know, like, there's more things we can do. So, you know, we definitely need a population decline. Well, I say that in the sense of, because I just love Australian nature. But
I love Australian nature.
Your individual, and so I'm saying you just generally might say, like, no, you don't need a population decline because hunting is more important. But from a conservation standpoint, we definitely need a population decline, and recreational hunters need to be the ones who do it. We need to be allowed to do it. So how can we do that is with more access. We don't need a North American model simply because we don't need tags. Like, they need it because they need to work out the carrying capacity of a land because they want to keep those animals. Look, we don't really need to keep these animals, not all of them. So we don't really need a tag system.
No.
Because there's estimated to be 2 million deer in Australia. Like we're not getting rid of them all.
We need to pump those numbers up.
As much as we try. What's that?
Said we need to pump those numbers up.
You need to pump down. You need to pump up the recreational hunting numbers. But what would be a good system is, like Victoria's system nationwide. We have people buy licenses, and have that directly go to preserving these areas. Like, maybe revegetation processes have this money go to buying land so they can't be sold to developers.
Yeah. 100%.
Right? So it doesn't have to go to conservation in terms of this revegetation. It can just be, hey, we spent all this money buying your licenses to hunt this area. We got rid of all the deer. Now we've bought it. You cannot sell it to some developer to put housing, to put a new Westfield, to put a new cinema, right? It's, we conserved this location and we've bought it with our tags.
What do you know about Pittman Robertson and Dingle Johnson acts in America?
Off the top of my head, I've mostly forgotten it because it's 10 o'clock, but I've watched, Steve Rinella's documentary where he goes into detail. I actually have a friend in the US who is a hunter, and she has a master's in biology, and she works for the government. She does all the biology for this massive plot of land, of government-owned land, like 10,000 acres or something, like tens of thousands of acres, where she does all the deer tags, where she allocates the money that comes in from the Pittman-Robertson Act, and allocates all that money. So basically what that act is like, the money from hunting equipment, hunting supplies, hunting tags, goes into buying land, goes into preserving areas, goes into paying the people who do this sort of stuff as well, and all that.
There's a small tax on all hunting, firearms, ammunition, that goes back into conservation, whether it's funding studies, buying land, paying biologists to do the studies, and all of that type of stuff. How do you reckon, if we scrapped like the GST on all hunting and fishing stuff in Australia, but did say half of what the GST is on a style of Pittman Robertson, Dingle Johnson Act to cover the costs more so of what you're talking about, and actually get hunters to put money where their mouth is in a direct...
So this is really interesting because just yesterday, New South Wales DPI, or not DPI, whoever does the money stuff, released a document outlining how much hunters put into the New South Wales economy. Robert Borsak shared it, but
Yep.
I skimmed over it, and hunting was actually the highest. Now, review was done in 2019 and 2020, showing how much hunters put into the national economy, and it's $2.4 billion. So let's just pretend all of that was retail sales.
Yeah.
So something that incurred GST, right? So what's 10% of 2.4 billion? You got it.
I'm not a maths type, mate.
$240 million. Okay. 200. So that's not how it actually works. But let's say all of that, $2.4 billion incurred a GST incursion, right? $240 million instead of GST goes to conservation fund. Bro, we could buy so much land. We could buy so much land. We could
buy land, fence it off,
man.
take out predators, cats,
Oh,
foxes,
my God.
dogs.
It was so good. Because look, not to go back to the people making a point about whataboutisms. It's like, yeah, land development is the biggest thing in Australia, right? So if we can buy the land, we can kill the deer, most of them. Let's not kill all of them, just to make you happy. But we can kill a lot of the deer, and we can stop it from being bulldozed. So look, there's a point to that, but if you start doing it for one industry, then every industry is going to be like, well, what about mine, etc., which I've thought about, which we already have with the road excise, fuel excise tax, right? So when you buy fuel, you get charged GST, and then you get charged the fuel excise tax. So this thing already exists for roads. It can definitely exist for hunting.
But that's what I'm saying. Scrap the GST.
I would, yeah. I mean, I would love that. Every
Hunting
other
gear is
industry
already
can just whatever. I don't care about other industries, but yeah, like firearm sales, whose most genuine reasons are recreational hunting. License sales, I'm pretty sure they incur GST. All of that. Yeah, I think that would be good. So yeah, we can definitely bring in some parts of the North American model, but the main part I have a problem with is like tags and all that, because that comes down to the carrying, like working out the carrying capacity of the land of these animals. And when you're dealing with invasive species, it's the carrying capacity of the land for these species compared to the minimum viable population, and then you've got the most amount of an organism before damage incurs. And we know that one deer incurs damage.
Yeah.
Right. So doing that will just mean this land can support 0 deer.
Yeah, I don't think when people are talking about the North American model wildlife, they're talking so much about the tag system. They're more talking about that Pittman Robertson, Dingle Johnson style, where their money's going back into conservation. The Dingle Johnson's pretty much what the Pittman Robertson is, but for fishing. So, you'd help do, stocking programs more. Like another state that's brilliant with stocking is Victoria. They stock all their waterways with their licensed sails, fix boat ramps, put in artificial reefs, all of that stuff, where all these other states could learn a thing or two from.
Yeah. So it's remember, as far as I can tell, it's basically what happens with that license you buy when you get your deer hunting license from GMA.
Fishing license, hunting license.
Yeah, they do all that. I don't think they go out to buy land to lock it away from developers, but I've read that they do fund revegetation stuff, that they do fund fixing parts of the forestry, as well as paying their employees and all that as well. But yeah, if we can take away the GST from firearm sales and all that, and have this fund, that would be sick. Most realistically, it'd be a tax on top of rather than replace GST, because the federal government is going to be like, yeah, I want less money. Federal government is going to be like, I want more. So we have to include the GST plus the tax.
Yeah, no, you wouldn't want plus. Because hunting equipment.
We wouldn't, but most realistically, it's what they would do.
It's already so expensive with, like, you compare what we pay. It's ridiculous.
Well, I still get staff discounts, so
well, la di da. So this has already ran into 3 and a bit hours of podcasting. It's been the longest HCP episode so far. So we'll start wrapping it up, I reckon. What else would you like to add to?
Well, don't ask me that question, because we'll go on for another 3 hours. For anyone who's still listening, look, I can continue to talk about this for a very long time. This has been the community I've been in for a very long time, like professionally, more than 10 years. Before I was even 18, I was working in the firearm and hunting industry. And recreationally, obviously, I've been hunting. And yeah, I went to university, incurred a hex debt, and 3.5 years of my life, just because I like hunting so much and really wanted to make sure that we were doing the right thing and confirm that we're doing the right thing. So it's more what I want to add, bro. We'll be here until tomorrow. So if anyone has anything they want to talk to me about, just email Eureka. Well, don't email. Well, just talk to Eureka Tactical. I try not to check my DMs when it's like a random. But if you do want to know more, then read the articles I put out in Eureka Tactical.
Go to the website.
Try and find studies. Read the studies. Don't read some, certain council's interpretation of the studies. Look, understand that research itself isn't against you. Biologists aren't against you. We want every tool to be utilized. And then as someone who cares about the economy, I want recreational hunting to be the biggest tool utilized, because then at least money is going into the economy rather than out of the economy. And deer never going to be eradicated, so don't worry. We're still going to have some. You're still going to have opportunities. Just try and think about the Australian environment.
Yeah, 100% there. Yeah, slide into Dan's DMs if you want to get onto him about anything he said. And
yeah, if you're in Queensland and you have deer and you want someone to shoot them, I'm not a fan of paying thousands of dollars. So if you want to have me on the property,
somebody get Dan on some.
I'll give you a discount on a $24 shirt for access to your property. No, just understand, like, science isn't against you. Research isn't against hunting. It's just certain people are using the research to justify mass culling. I want to use research to justify more hunting.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely agree with that. We have a lot of banter. We're joking about how you want to eradicate deer. I know you don't want to eradicate deer. You want what's best for the environment,
right,
and the economy and recreational hunters. So there's a very, very fine line balance between those things.
It's a super fine line, like a hair.
So yeah, if you've enjoyed anything that Dan said, head over, slide into his DMs, go check out the Eureka Tactical website. Check out the shirts that he's that they sell. Badass. I rock them
Yeah.
weekly.
All this knowledge, like I said, I now have a hex debt. I incur that hex debt because I want to help the hunting community. So I would not hate if you learned something today. Look, I wouldn't hate it if you bought some stuff from Eureka Tactical. I'm trying to support the hunting community as best as possible, and I don't want to go back to work in security in the valley.
And if you work for GMA, get Dan a freaking job.
Also that. If you own a property and you need a scientist, looking for work. I just graduated. I need to pay off this debt, but ideally through providing services to the hunting community, providing a good message. I wouldn't hate it if you learned something today, if you just supported me back.
Hopefully you did. It was good fun. I've definitely learned a fair bit, and looking at stuff in a different perspective. I can be as stubborn as a mule with some stuff, as Dan's come to find out over the last few years of us talking about all of this shit back and forth. If you want to check out his stuff, he does plenty of work for Firearm Owners United. He was a major pusher in the Suppressor September that they did last year, and a bunch of other things. The proposed bow hunting ban in South Australia, he wrote up all the letter stuff and put that out in the public as well. But yeah, he does lots of amazing work for hunters and shooters across Australia. So
I do my best. I would suggest, if you really want to get a good view of my work, look at my submission for the National Feral Deer Action Plan.
Yeah, definitely. He's plastered that all over the Facebook the last couple of days, but you might have to go back 3-4 weeks. Is there any guests you'd recommend?
Yeah, so someone you mentioned earlier is someone I talk to semi-frequently, another scientist, another biologist. His name's Forrest Galante. Over the past few years, we've just had a small relationship form, and he's a really cool dude. And he goes spearfishing. And I really like it when biologists and scientists are also in the hunting world, in the spearfishing world, etc. And I think he would have a very interesting perspective to give to you in terms of science and
Definitely.
science's role in taking animals. If you can reach out to Forrest Galante, I think he would have a really fantastic view, and perspective on this and on hunting in other parts of the world, from someone who spearfishes, from someone who is a scientist as well. I think that'd be really, really cool.
Yeah, I definitely could see myself going down a few rabbit holes with him after hearing a few of his conversations and seeing all of his videos from his podcast. What's his podcast called?
The Wild Times podcast.
Yeah.
And if you listen from start, like the first episode to now, you hear my name about 100 times being dropped. So
no one likes a bragger, mate.
I am extremely humble, as you have just realised over the past 3.5 hours.
Very, very.
I've had a lot of fun. I hope you have too.
I have
had a lot of fun.
I have. I hope people stick around. It's a longer podcast compared to what they're used to hearing from me. You know, it's 11 p.m. here on Sunday night.
Just for anyone who is still listening, there will be a discount code, HCP, all capitals, of 15% off for the first 2 weeks this podcast is out. That's more of a discount than I give Zach.
That's pretty good.
So if you've listened to this whole thing, you get a nice reward of 15% off our shirts and stuff.
Get on it. I don't think I'm going to tag that in the comments. No. So if you made it this far, Zach
gets that. 13%. So.
I appreciate it, man, and I hope everyone learns a bit and takes a bit away. And yeah, I'm keen to hear any rebuttals and see what you guys plaster Dan with.
Yeah.
No,
I'm keen to see just hundreds of sales, so I don't have to go back to work in security.
nah, easy, man. Thank you very much for all the hard work that you do and putting this podcast together and the feral deer action plan that you put together and submitted.
Thanks for having this, and I can see you're super tired, so
Yeah,
let's wrap up.
I'm up in about 5 hours, so less than that.
Yeah, let's wrap up.
Easy. Thank you very much, man. Have a good night.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Hunting Connection Podcast. Please head over to our social media and give us a follow. Instagram at Hunting Connection Podcast, Facebook at Hunting Connection Podcast, Twitter at Hunting Connect, TikTok at Hunting Connection Podcast. If you've enjoyed, please share with your friends and family, tag us in your photos and videos on social media, subscribe, rate and review to help grow the podcast. If you're interested in giving additional support to the podcast, you can head over to our podcast's Patreon page. Thank you very much for listening and catch you next episode.